I am. Thank
There you are.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
If it's all right, let's go ahead and bring our December 8th board meeting to order. And with that, I'd like to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you guys will all follow with me, I'll go ahead and start it off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Russell, can we get a roll call, please?
Trustee Gator,
Here.
Trustee Jerome,
Here.
Trustee Kenny,
Present.
Trustee McDonald,
Here.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Here.
Mayor Hammond.
Here. Okay, item 3. We are going to have a couple of amendments to the agenda. Brad, would you like to talk about a couple of them first?
I can, Mr. Mayor. A couple things. We've got we probably need to reorder the ordinances adopting the sums or appropriating money, levying taxes, and adopting the budget. Properly, those ought to be adopt the budget, which is Ordinance 19-2020, appropriate sums 21-2020, and then we levy taxes, which is 20-2020. So we need to do it in that order if we could.
Okay, let's go back over that again there. Let's just go by action item here because there's a lot of order.
Item 7 should become item 5.
Yeah,
Item 6 should become item 7. And item 5 should become item 6.
got it. Okay, are there any other amendments that anyone would like to bring up or do we need to make? Okay, there was a suggestion. I'd like to throw it out there to the board real quick. Patty and Cody, listen to this. We got a pretty big agenda here tonight, and we have a lot of important issues. And we do have a presentation, the comprehensive plan update, which is a presentation by Cody Bird. Would it be wise, time-wise, to put that at the end of our action item list? Just a thought. We don't have
Sure.
to.
Cody, are you there?
I am, yeah.
Would our consultants, are we paying them by the hour?
We're not. I'm providing that presentation tonight. I have no problem with
Excellent.
it to the end.
Okay, so you don't mind being last?
Not a problem.
Fabulous. Great
All right,
idea.
so we're going to move that to the end, and it's important as well, but it's a presentation, so we'll put that at the end. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, my understanding is I had a couple tweaks on the minutes that were not substantive. I'm assuming we don't need to take that off the consent agenda. I'll just get them to the clerk, obviously.
Okay.
right.
All right, we're going to move on then. Okay, there's nothing else. Any conflicts of interest? Okay. Well, let's move on to item B. This is our community participation. This is the public comment point where we're going to allow for public comment. Individuals wishing to speak on items that are not action item related on this evening's agenda. You will need to raise your hand now. And once called upon, please state your name and address for the record. And any individuals called on will be limited to 3 minutes during this public comment hearing for which to state their concerns or opinions. So let's open it up to the public at this point.
Mr. Mayor, we have Patrick Reeves.
Mr. Reeves.
Am I coming through?
Yes, sir.
Did you get my address?
I didn't get anything, sir.
Okay. 8793 Flaming Arrow Avenue, Wellington, Colorado.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the video is coming through or not, but we're trying to find out how we get onto the budget for the local skate park downtown for maintenance monies and minimal upkeep.
Okay, that process is probably a little tricky right now this year.
Well, there hasn't been anything budgeted on the skate park for 3 years, yet we have received some monies from some of the other things that have gone on, which I'm sure everybody is aware of just from driving by. So we're trying to understand and have a organized, understand where, we know who to go to the city, but we don't have any clear numbers. And there hasn't been any for 3 years towards anything with the skate park as far as we can find on the budgets.
I guess I'll defer to our Parks Advisory Board or Patty as well. I'm not sure exactly, do we have discretionary funds set aside for things like this for parks or?
I don't know, but that's a great question. So let me follow up. And Mr. Reeves, if you could send me an email with your information, I can get back with you. Do you need my email address, or you can get it off of our website?
We'll get it off the website. I have one other thing that wanted to address while I still had some times as far as
Sure.
with the parks. I have tried to fill out application for the Parks Board in the past after being invited by a former member. And that, I don't know that was ever even brought up, that it was, I don't know what happened to my application. So we have tried to approach the Parks Board. And so I would like a little clarity on how we can do that, because we've already tried in the past and not really, I've gone to meeting. I tried to apply for one of the open seats. So, kind of spinning our wheels with that also.
All right. We did go through a process of nominating those positions as well. Not sure how many applicants we had. I think it was 2.
A question.
Yeah,
Patrick, did you
go ahead. I
apply?
apologize.
Did you apply on the town website for the open board positions?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Let us track that down then and see and find your application. We do those interviews periodically based on available spots. So if your application is already in.
Right. And I was invited to apply by JC Cox at the time.
Fantastic. Yeah. Good referral for sure. Okay, so let's track down your application, because we're doing a new process where we accept those applications online, and then as the positions are open, we'll do open interviews for those applicants. So I don't think we have that information readily available right now, but that is the process. So if you did submit your application, that's the right way to do it. So we can track that down and get a hold of you too, to see where that's at. But thank you for applying, and thank you for wanting to volunteer. That is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, so those are 2 issues. The one major one being the current budget, how we get some funds to maintain and how that's organized. So it's clear what we have available, because we're already needing some things with the current situation.
Understood, Patrick. Hey, so circle back to our town administrator, Patty Garcia, and then also copy Trustee Kenny on the position for parks. Okay, you can get their emails on the website both, and I got notes written down, so I'll follow up on the skate park as well. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for your time. I know I've gone over my 3 minutes, so we'll let you get back to your meeting, but really appreciate you guys, and thank you.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Mayor Hammond, I'd like to ask Ms. Garcia if you can touch base with the Parks Department. We do have $25,000 in the budget for Parks Playground, general repair and maintenance, as well as there's another portion in the park for parks and lawn care of 80,000. And if we could get clarification, if there's any reason that we cannot be utilizing some of these funds that are in the budget currently to address these issues, if you could work with staff to figure that out, or if additional action is needed from the board.
Absolutely. Bob just joined. Maybe he has some insight.
Yeah, I can say, Trustee Gator, you found the right GL. That would be the spot for maintenance funding for things like this, the skate ramp, and we have included a budget for that in there. So that would be money to implement any repairs or anything like that that's needed for the ramp in particular.
Okay, would it be possible for us to maybe make sure we get that information over to Mr. Reeves as far as what they need to submit to the town, as far as what the process would be to get that in, as far as when they letting you guys know, hey, here's some things that might need to be adjusted. Can we just make sure that he has that information to go through the correct process?
Sure, I think we've had many discussions with Patrick and Jenny and myself and Jim Miller. So any kind of repairs that are needed, we would work with Patrick and other folks to identify those and take care of those as they come up.
Okay, thank you.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, so Bob is right. We have talked a few different times, and it's never been clear about telling us what was available and some of the details, even in the way he just spoke, where he's not talking about the skate park. He's talking specifically about the ramp. Now, there are other things that at the park need to be addressed. So those are some of the details that we run into when we're discussing monies and budget with Bob. So it would really help us with being the ones who are actually doing the work to keep these up, and also know it, being skateboarders ourselves, you know, what are funding, what we can fix, what we can move, where the monies are for those kinds of things. And all we ever ask for is materials. We never ask for anything with labor. That's completely volunteer, just like everything that's bought that has put that ramp together was completely volunteer, hundreds of hours by multiple different people. So there's a lot of clarity that needs, and kind of what Bob was talking about, he kind of surfaced over it, and these are some of the issues that we've run into. So I would kind of like to try to address those in the future.
Absolutely. Point
be
taken.
specific about, you know.
So I will follow up. My concern, just first glance, is that is town property, and there are insurance concerns for people that, for someone who is not contracted by the town doing work on town property. We are liable for a lot of that. So let me follow up with Mr. Reeves, and we will go from there.
Let's do that. We also have a park.
I'll keep the trustees in the loop.
We also have a Parks Advisory Board. They need to be involved. We have Parks Board. You know, that's what they're there for.
Got it.
They need to be able to hear this man and these concerns. Okay. Patrick, we're going to circle back on that. We're not going to let this go by. Who's next?
No, I understand. And I've had a chance. Thank
Mr. Mayor, I see no other hands raised at this time.
Well, I certainly didn't mean to cut Mr. Reeves off in mid-swing there, if that's what we did, but time's up. But I think we need to, let's make sure we follow back on that and get that understood. Okay, if there's no other hands, I'm going to close the public meeting, bring it back to the board. And we're going to item 2, we're going to move the comprehensive plan to the end. So that'll take us to item C, the consent agenda. And this is meeting minutes of November 10th, 2020, the board meeting of trustees. If there's no changes other than what Brad brought up, and I get a motion to approve the consent agenda of November 10th.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, first item, D1, ordinance number 18-2020. This is a conditionally annexation of the land annexation to the town of Wellington. This is going to be something Cody Bird's going to educate us on. Cody?
Thank you, Mayor. This is Cody Bird, Planning Director. The request before you tonight is a public hearing item. It is for request by the property owner to annex land into the town of Wellington. The property is located on the east side of 6th Street along the I-25 corridor. It's just south of the Days Inn. It's a small parcel, triangular shaped, and it's not been incorporated in the town yet. And that's why the property owner is requesting this annexation so they can develop or redevelop that site. Staff's been working with the property owner for a little while on this, and they've submitted their request. This board of trustees took the first action to initiate the annexation proceedings and set tonight's meeting date as the date for the required public hearing. Prior to tonight, the item was referred to the Planning Commission, who considered this item, and the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of annexation of the property into the town of Wellington. And the Planning Commission's recommendation suggested C3 highway commercial zoning be the appropriate zoning district for this property once it's brought into the town. Included in your packet is the required information for the impact statements. It talks about the land use surrounding properties, how services will be provided to the site. Municipal services are readily available in 6th Street. Water and sewer would be provided by the town. We have the adequate consent from the water district surrounding Wellington. They've agreed to not provide services there. The town can do that. And those extension of public services for this size site is not expected to increase the level of service demands beyond what can be accommodated with our existing resources. There is a public hearing tonight. That was the high-level staff report. You would, Mayor, you would want to provide an opportunity for public comment. There would be an opportunity for the applicant to address any of those comments. And then staff can make any closing comments or answer any questions before the board deliberates and ultimately makes a decision. Any questions on the process? Okay, Mr. Mayor, if there are no questions, then I would turn it over to you for public hearing.
Well, board members, anything real quick on this annexation?
Mr. Mayor, this is Brad. I would make one comment. We probably need to add a provision that the annexation is conditional on road dedications. If you look at the plat, it provides that the annexation plat, it provides that the right-of-way is dedicated by the plat. The problem is an annexation plat doesn't contain a dedication clause. And so we probably need to have a separate condition on the annexation that provides that they'll dedicate the additional right-of-way as shown on the plat.
That's something that can be added, right?
Yes, it can. And we just need to add it in the annexation.
All right, we don't need it's not a separate item.
It just would be, it needs to be included in the ordinance, so, in the annexation ordinance.
All right, I got a note. Okay, let's go ahead and turn it over to the public if there's no other questions.
Mr. Mayor, I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, well, we'll close the public meeting. Are the representatives of the annexation, do they want to speak at this time?
Mr. Mayor, this is Cody Bird, Planning Director. I don't see the applicant's name on our attendee list, but I don't know if there's a phone number or such that I just don't recognize a name.
Well, we'll give it a little bit and just to see if they're trying to get their equipment figured out.
And again, Mayor, I don't see the name on the attendee list. We did provide the notification to them
All right.
and they were aware of the meeting.
Fair enough. Let's bring it back to the board then. Any final comments or questions?
I have a few questions.
Okay.
The first one is, Cody, can you, for those of us who aren't intimately involved in the Planning Commission, could you explain to the board just a real quick synopsis of the difference between C1 and C3?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Trustee Jerome. When the Planning Commission considered this item, I would suggest that probably most of the conversation was limited to the property is located along I-25 in a high visibility corridor. And that was probably the overwhelming factor in that consideration, was that it was located along that corridor with other properties that are also zoned C3 highway commercial. More to your point, what's the difference between C1 and C3? I'd like to, if I could, share a quick little presentation here that I put together highlighting those differences. And let's see if I can get this in presentation mode. There we go. Maybe. There it goes. So this is a location map showing this particular property, as we described a moment ago. And this is a kind of a zoom in with some labels of our current zoning map. As you can see, the C3 is in this kind of purple color along the I-25 corridor, as well as some of our retail shopping. Baumgars is in purple over here too. And our C1 is the community commercial zoning district, which is really more intended for kind of office business types of uses that aren't as automobile oriented and highway traffic driven. So that's kind of a close up of the zoning. And then I wanted to show you also the land use patterns. You can see from the aerial photograph, it's not the most current, but it's the most current I had available. And you can see what those land use patterns look like. The area along 6th Street on the east side is a hotel, fast food restaurants, gas stations. And the west side of 6th Street, which is zone C1, is more of the office, business, and medical type of use. Near this site, we also see that there's quite a bit of single family attached dwelling units. There's an existing single family detached dwelling along 6th Street, and then some additional office medical. There's a chiropractic office and a drive-through pharmacy under construction currently here. And then of course, Ridley's Family Market and some retail a little further south. Differences between the C1 and the C3 zoning. Building setbacks, floor area ratios, which is the amount of buildable space, are largely the same. The big difference on the dimensional standards is the height. C1 community commercial is limited to 35 feet, which would actually allow quite a bit of flexibility for building form. 45 feet is allowed for the highway commercial. With this particular annexation property, the lot size is such that I don't think that the building height is going to be a significant factor for that particular development. And then here on the next two slides, I've highlighted from the zoning uses standpoint. This slide is showing uses that are allowed in both the C1 and the C3, the community commercial and the highway commercial. You can see there's quite a range of uses that are allowed in both. In parentheses behind, I've put conditional use. Some of these are only allowed with conditional review by the Planning Commission and the board. So you can see these shared uses are really kind of compatible for both zoning districts. this last slide, and my apologies, the font's a little small there. But this is really the big difference between C1 and C3 uses. You can see that the C1 was really intended more for that office medical type of use, which you see a lot of on the west side of 6th Street. And whereas the C3 highway commercial is really geared towards motorists, tourism, and offers a little bit broader type of commercial base type of uses, including where it says clubs and lodges, think like fraternal organizations like Rotary or Moose Club, your similar type of fraternal organizations. But then you see vehicle sales, repair, gas stations, car washes. Nightclubs requires a conditional use, but that's something that's not going to be allowed in the C1 community commercial. And then a couple of other larger uses there, not likely to fit on this particular property, but hospitals, veterinary clinics and hospitals, large retail, so big box stores or mid box stores, supermarkets, mini storage, equipment rental, print shops, laboratories for testing. There's quite a broad range of uses allowed in the C3 commercial. Another big difference in the community commercial or C1, there's no drive-throughs allowed because it's not intended to be so much automobile oriented, but they are allowed as a conditional use if reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. So those are the big differences from a land use standpoint with regards to the C3 and C1 zoning districts. Trustee Jerome, does that provide a base for the inquiry, and what other information could I provide?
No, that provided pretty much that. You actually covered my second question that I was going to have was what the zoning was of all the surrounding properties. So it seems to me that most of the properties that are close to that are actually C1, and really the only C3 is just up to the north where they have lots of space on their lots to accommodate vehicles and stuff. Based off of the size of this lot, I can't see it being much of anything other than an small office building because of the odd shape and the not having enough room, for I don't see how you could have a drive-through in there unless you want to do a Canes on College where you're backing up traffic for, blocks on end because, you got a ton of people that are waiting to get through a drive-through that block traffic. So the other question I have is, I know there's a building on there that's obviously not been occupied for a long time. Obviously it hasn't had utilities, electrical, obviously water, and I don't know about the sewer, if it was ever connected to the city sewer. Would this be treated more as a new development when it would boil down to, if it moved on from here, would they have to submit site plans and all that type of thing? Because I highly doubt they would probably use the building in its fit, form, and function as it is now. Knowing that a building that has sat for multiple years deteriorates, and obviously it probably doesn't meet any commercial building codes, so it'd probably be best demolished and started from scratch. So do you have any insight on that, Cody?
Yeah, I certainly can. And you've raised some really great points, Trustee Jerome. I've had those conversations with the applicant, which is the property owner. And I've also had similar questions with a number of businesses that were inquiring or at least considering purchasing that property and ultimately backed out for some of the same reasons you brought up. You raised some good points. I'll try and tackle a couple of them. First, starting with, once the property is annexed into the town of Wellington town limits, it is subject to our subdivision regulations, our zoning code, our adopted building codes and fire codes. So any changes to that structure would have to be in conformance with the town's regulations. Site plan review would be required for any major changes to the property. If the applicant came in and all they wanted to do was utilize the existing building with some building improvements, They may be able to do so, but it'd be pretty challenging simply because of the utility connections, which you also mentioned. The property was historically served by Northern Colorado Water District, and they have since declined to continue to provide services there. They've actually abandoned that line. So they would need to connect to town water. And to your other point, this property has not been connected to the town sewer in the past. There's a private septic system for this site, which has been unused for a number of years, and staff has questioned the integrity of that system. We haven't heard from the owner if they've done any follow-up to evaluate the condition. But the town has stated that in accordance with state statutes, since public sewer is available nearby, they have to connect to that sewer service in order to utilize it, to develop that site. Building wise, I've not been inside this structure. We do suspect that it would need some upgrades in order to occupy it. All of those would have to be in accordance with the town's adopted building and fire codes, including if it's being used for commercial purposes. The commercial fire codes, depending on the use, may require fire sprinklers or some other mechanism to utilize that structure. So there's a lot of questions that still have left to be answered. And a lot of it may depend on what proposed use the applicant brings forward or any contract purchaser. Staff knows that once we get that request, we'll be working with the applicant or their purchaser pretty closely to evaluate all those requirements and help them get to the right spot.
Okay. And then this is an opinion from you, Cody. Based off of all the information that we just talked about, wouldn't it be better to zone this property C1 versus C3 just based off of the face value of what you've got there? The most likelihood use of that property is going to be some type of office space. Wouldn't it just make sense to zone it C1 and just move on with it?
You know, Trustee, I think you make a great point. And again, as I mentioned briefly in my presentation, the Planning Commission, when they considered this request, primarily was looking at just the location and proximity to the highway and felt highway zoning would be acceptable. When you look at the list of permitted uses that we shared a moment ago, which I'm happy to go back to if needed, but those uses that are automobile oriented, larger retail, larger commercial, hotels, hospitals, and the parking requirements needed for some of those more intense uses really don't lend itself to this size and configuration of property. Staff would be fully supportive of a C1 zoning. I think that would be a good fit for the surrounding environs, and it would still allow that business office type of use that would be likely for this type of a location and property. So staff would support a C1 zone district change if that was the board's desire.
Thank you.
Other comments?
I had just a couple of questions, and I don't know, did the applicants come into the meeting yet, or are they still not present?
I will take a look. I do not see the owner's name on the list. There is one that's shown as unavailable, and I can't identify who that is.
Okay.
I also couldn't tell you if there's anyone who's representing the applicant who I don't recognize their name.
Okay. So you may not be able to answer this question, but in your conversations with the applicants, with this look at zoning this either C1 or C3, would that zoning fit within their desires to utilize the property?
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to speak for the owner or the applicant. We've had several conversations with both the owner, the representatives, real estate brokers, and individuals who are inquiring. There's been a range of different options thrown out there. Many of them declined to pursue purchasing the property. I can't tell you who they're speaking with right now.
Okay.
So I really don't have the information, but I know that they've looked at a lot of different options.
Okay. And then the second question is, I know that if we annex this in, and obviously with the building being in a state of disrepair, is that going to become something where all of a sudden they get annexed into the town, and then all of a sudden we have enforcement saying, well, your building is not up to code, even though they haven't asked to permit it, they haven't done anything with it, they just simply got, is that going to cause something where now all of a sudden, because they're in the town, the building doesn't meet certain specifications that they're now getting in trouble because their building that's been abandoned, and rightfully, generally work things with that. That's just a concern that I have, that we aren't going to be annexing them into the town and then coming down on them because this building's not up to code or whatnot, if it's not being used.
Yeah, good questions, trustee. So just, I'll tackle this. If there's something else I'm going to circle back to, let me know. The owner did request the annexation, and typically that doesn't happen unless they have a clear understanding of what they want to do with the property. In my mind, perhaps the biggest enforcement activity that might come up is the tall grass and weeds or undesirable growth questions. We can talk about that with the applicant again and make sure they understand fully what those requirements are. But in terms of the building and the structure on site, there are some known deficiencies that the applicant would have to work through in order to reuse that building. We will work with them on those things. But from a general enforcement standpoint, if their contract purchaser decides not to pursue this request or what have you, the town staff isn't going to immediately send a notice of violation for the structure. They've got it boarded up. We're not aware of any reports from law enforcement with any vandalism or squatters or break-ins or anything of that nature. So the building appears to be secure. If it becomes significantly deteriorated where it's getting into a property maintenance code, staff can take the appropriate action at that time. But at this point, I don't see any cause to start that alarm.
Perfect. I think it'd be great if we can just make sure they're fully aware of what that could entail down the road, but I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, Mr. Byrd, trustee Whitehouse. So obviously the annexation documentation talks about C3. If there is some consideration to change this without the owner's consent or even presence, I mean, are we tabling this? I know it's a public hearing and it's been published, so it can be a public hearing. What would be the next step forward if the consideration of the board was to change this from the current C3 to C1 zoning?
Yeah, so good question, trustee. It's the board's discretion to zone the property upon annexation. Tabling is always an option if the board feels that's prudent. This topic didn't come up with time to discuss it with the property owner. So I can't speak to what their desire would be. But I would simply suggest that the board always has the option to evaluate a change in zoning at any point down the road. So if the board chose to go with a C1 zone, that still permits a wide range of commercial and business uses. If the applicant wasn't satisfied with that, the board could also consider changing that to C3 at a future date. So that's certainly an option.
Also, go ahead, Rebecca.
So I am in favor of approving it with the C3 personally. I think that consistency along the corridor is important to have it as the C3. I think the property size and shape, which is unusual, will restrict any uses of any in its own. The property shape and size is going to restrict a lot of the uses of the property. I could see things like car washes or, other small applications as being viable in this area, but, without knowing the intent of the property owner or the buyers, I would hate to restrict that based on the current proceedings that have, been recommended for approval from the Planning Commission. Same way, if we did want to change that zoning in the future, we could change it from C3 to C1, but without the input from those applying for the annexation, I don't think it's fair to change it at this point if there is any considerations that we're not aware of from the owner. So personally, I'm in favor of approving it as is, and I think it's going to be a fantastic development based on the fact that property is currently unused and not my favorite part of 6th Street to see or go by. So I look forward to development of that property, and I'm in favor of approving it as is with C3.
Mr. Byrd, would it be logical to just, if there's any rush
we could simply table this if there's not, and go ahead and get input from the owner as to whether they care if it's C1 or C3.
Yeah, and Mr. March, that's certainly an option. As I mentioned, tabling is always an option. Since we've advertised the public hearing, if the board chose to table this item, we would just have to state the date and time to continue it.
Right.
And staff can reach out to the applicant and request some conversations about the C1 versus the C3 zoning. The only other consideration that I would give to the comments that I heard from board members was if it was desirable to take action tonight. And when you look at the zoning structure, the C1 is slightly more restrictive than the C3. And so if the land uses was a consideration, zoning it to a less restrictive zoning district would be a better course of action than to zone to a less restrictive and then try and take uses away in the future. So generally when you zone, you go from the narrowest zoning district possible and move upwards from there in the future. It's very hard to go backwards. So if that is a consideration, I'd just throw that out there for the board.
Some feedback I'm going to provide on potentially tabling it is, I would hate for the process to be delayed further. I mean, for businesses and for this kind of use, I would like it from our perspective, from the trustees, that we're encouraging the quickest possible process within, our legal limitations. So my preference would be not to table this item.
Okay, Trustee Jerome, you had a question, one more?
Well, yeah, I guess I did have a question. I agree with Cody that we should do the restricted version of it first, C1, and if they decide that C1 is not going to fit to what they're wanting to do, they're going to have to come back to the Planning Commission and to the board anyway for plat approvals and all that other stuff. So if they feel that C1's not going to fit what they want to submit to the boards and commissions, then we can obviously address it then. As far as not knowing what their intentions are, I mean, they were fully informed that this was the night that this board was going to take action on this. And if they didn't feel that it was important enough to be here to be able to answer our questions, then they need to live with whatever decision this board makes tonight. And if they don't like it, then they can come back to the board at a future time and request a rezoning. That's my feeling on this. If it's such a rush, then, this has been pushed through pretty quickly. If it was that important, then they should be here to tell us why C3 is the preferable zoning versus C1. So I'm in favor of doing C1, and if they want to change it, they can come back to us with reasons why, and if we agree with them, then we can change it.
Okay, let me ask a couple basic questions on those points that everybody brought up, because it doesn't matter to me if it's C3 or C1. I just want to do what's good for the people, and we don't have them here tonight. I wish they were. It went through the Planning Commission. Cody, who recommended C3?
Yeah, so Mayor, this is Cody Bird, Planning Director. Staff had initially thrown the C3 zoning district out there based on the proximity and the compatibility with the C3 zoning north of the property. And that was staff's recommendation to the Planning Commission, which the Planning Commission supported. Admittedly, and this may be on me, I didn't look at the C1 very closely just because of the proximity and the being on the same side of the highway, or of the same side of 6th Street as the adjacent properties to the north. But I think to some of the comments that were brought up tonight and the request for further evaluation, the C1 zoning does make a lot of sense when you look at the surrounding uses. So staff would be very willing to support that.
So the owners' perspective, the annexation owners, they didn't request C3.
Yeah, very good clarification. So when the owners initially reached out to me, and this was quite a few months ago, when they first brought this request up, but they were, I think, requesting the C3 based on my initial reaction. So I really can't speak for the applicant to know who their business that they're talking to may be and what zoning they actually need. I do think that, as the mayor pointed out very astutely, they're probably just reacting to kind of the initial conversations that they had with staff.
We can either table it, or we can approve it, or not approve it, bring it back.
I would personally lean towards making a decision one way or the other tonight. I understand that part of the challenge we have is that we don't have the property owners here to answer the questions, but I would be in full agreement with Trustee Jerome that this was properly publicized, and that is on them to be present at the public hearing. So I would be comfortable either way. I don't have I'm fine with C1 or C3. I would tend to lean towards, if we are going to have to make future changes, whichever one is going to be less work on our town staff would be my preference. So if it is simpler for us to go from C1 to C3 later, then I'd prefer to start there. If it's easier to go the opposite, to go from C3 to C1, then we can do that. I'm fine either way. But I would prefer that we just deal with it one way or the other today.
Yeah, let's do it tonight.
Let's do it today. But Cody, what's easier for you? If if they got to come back, what's easiest?
Either way, it doesn't require much more work for staff. As I think Trustee Jerome very astutely pointed out that in order to redevelop the site, the applicant's going to be working with staff through other procedures as well. What I would offer is that we can run, if they did need to come back and request a less restrictive zoning like C3, we could run that request concurrently with their other development approval process. It wouldn't take much time for staff to ramp that up and get that request at the same time. So I would say the C1 is a solid bet if the board wants to take action tonight. And if the applicant needs something different from C1, we'll bring that back to the board along with their other development requests.
All right, so let's take action tonight. Let's put it out there as C1. Everybody good with that? Want to put it to a motion?
I'll make a
Your
motion.
Honor, I'm sorry, Mr.
Your
Mayor.
Honor.
Sorry about that. I've been in court all day. What I would suggest is that relative to the conditions, when in section 1, where it says the annexation map and the annexation ordinance are recorded, I would suggest you provide that read the annexation map, the annexation ordinance, and a dedication of right-of-way as shown on the annexation map are recorded. And that will get you the right-of-way.
I'll tackle the motion, Troy.
Please.
I make a motion to approve ordinance number 18/2020, conditionally annexing the Lamb Annex to the town of Wellington in C3.
C3 or C1?
Make it, or sorry, C1 zoning, and then referencing what the town attorney says needs to be fixed.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Thanks for bringing that up, Jerome, tonight. It's a good one. All right, appreciate it, Cody. Let's move on. Item 2, wastewater treatment plant expansion, engineering design, project delivery. Mr. Myer.
Good evening, Mayor and board members. This is Dave Myer, staff engineer. So before you tonight are the staff recommendations for moving forward with our wastewater treatment plant expansion, and in particular for engineering design and project delivery method. So this is the product of roughly over a year's work amongst town staff and consultant Jacobs that started on the wastewater master plan a little over a year ago. So as stated in the previous board meetings, the plant's expansion needs are mostly capacity driven. And from where we're at with the plant's incoming hydraulic and biological loads, the state mandates that we now be in design. So the master plan recommended the expansion and explored options for treatment and added or updated facilities. And those recommendations included new buildings, new clarifiers, aeration facilities, and expansion to the digesters and drying beds. Town staff and the plant operators all concur with those recommendations. And I put a preliminary layout of the expansion facilities in your board package, so you can get an idea of what we're talking about. I also like to note that the master plan, the final version of the wastewater treatment plant master plan, will be delivered by Jacobs on Friday. So for the hiring of a design engineer, staff used a qualifications-based approach. We advertised a request for qualifications on the town's website, started on October 5th. 2 firms submitted their SOQs, that's statements of qualification, and using the evaluation criteria that we outlined in the RFQ, staff unanimously selected Jacobs as the more qualified firm. And we requested a proposal from Jacobs for design fees. And that first draft of the proposal was received on November 23rd. After a few iterations and scope and fee negotiations between Jacobs and the town staff, the final proposal was received on December 3rd, that's last week, Thursday, I believe. So the scope in that proposal includes the tasks that I listed in your agenda item, CDPHE coordination, 30, 60, 90, 100% design plans and specs, and coordination with the state and services during construction. These are all standard tasks. The proposed schedule, also shown in your package, shows a design initiated this month pending tonight's board approval. Design completion in January of 2022 and completion of construction in January of 2024. That's an ideal time to get the wastewater treatment plant online and primed up prior to commissioning of our water treatment plant expansion that's scheduled for completion in the spring of that year. So after we iterated on the scope and the fees, town staff does recommend accepting the Jacobs proposal for engineering, design, and construction services. The total cost of Jacobs proposal is roughly 4.9 million. That's about 14.5% of the estimated construction cost of 34 million. That portion, the portion of Jacobs design fees, roughly 2.9 out of that 4.9. That's at about 8.5% of the construction cost, and Jacobs construction services fees of about $2 million are about 6%. These percentages are consistent with industry standards for a project of this type and magnitude. Also like to note that these proposed costs are on a time and material basis. I've also been keeping Judi and Tyler of our finance team informed on these fees, and they can answer any questions you may have on that topic after the presentation here. There is a draft of the contract and the scope in your package if you want to take a peek at that. I did send that over to Attorney Marsh last week for his review. For the project delivery method now, town staff, we're recommending, again, going with the CMAR approach, that's construction manager at risk. That's what we're using at the water treatment plant. So unlike traditional design build approaches, this is a method in which a contractor comes on board, ideally when we're about at the 30% design level, and they provide pre-construction services during design. So the CMAR also delivers a guaranteed maximum price, or GMP. At about the 90% level, the town and the engineer will review that price and negotiate as needed to reach an agreed upon price. So in essence, we'll know what the construction cost will be when we're shovel ready. We currently have a request for proposal out there advertised on our website for the CMAR contractor. We've been entertaining questions and site visits from prospective contractors. We have a few coming up this week. The deadline for contractors to submit their proposal is December 23rd, a couple weeks from now. At that time, town staff will review and select the CMAR contractors. So we hopefully can get the best contractor that we can and be able to have that contractor on board when the design hits 30%, roughly in February of next year. And I did include a copy of the CMAR RFP in your package. So in conclusion, we're asking for authorization to execute the design contract with Jacobs for the wastewater treatment plant expansion and for the board's endorsement or blessing, if you will, to proceed with the CMAR project delivery approach. We feel it's important to get started on this design, given the tight time frame we're up against. We're getting the plan online and the expected turnover time from the state on all the submittals that they will have to approve. So I'm back tonight in this presentation by Bob Gowing, Mike Flores, and the Jacobs project team. Kyle Snyder and Al Paquette are here. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks so much for your consideration.
Real quick, Dave, you
Yes.
mentioned something earlier. You said time and material. This is a hard number. Is that right?
That's correct. It
Okay,
will not exceed that.
There's no time and material then, right?
It's based on the billing will be based on time and material.
Yeah, but you've got hard numbers in here, 4.9.
When they bill us for time and material, though, up to that 4.9.
So time and material not to exceed 4.9.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Bob, did you want to? Sorry, Bob.
No, I was just going to point out those are not to exceed numbers.
Okay, good enough. That's important to know. Board members got any questions? We've seen this quite a bit lately, so.
I do have a few questions. And so the first question, I know you mentioned that we posted the RFQ on the town website. Is that the normal process that we use for RFQs of this type, or do we have a different process we normally follow?
Trustee Gaylor, that's the procedure that we've been using at Public Works for pretty much since I came on board about a couple of years ago for the master plan, for the water treatment plant, and many other projects that we're doing of this magnitude. Post up advertisements on the website. We also reach out, by phone to make sure that the word gets out to contractors, consultants.
We did the same thing with this project as well, reaching out by phone to different contractors and whatnot.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
The other question, I did have a couple of, and again, I don't know if this is going to be changed. I did notice I think it was on page 75, items number 8 and 13. There appear to be multiple office. There's like a proposed new office building, and then also it looks like a repurposing of another building to serve as almost an office with conference room. And so I was a little bit questioning, if we're repurposing one building as an office, why are we building another building as an office potentially at the wastewater plant? Are we expecting a lot of administrative meetings to happen there? Or I don't quite understand what we're doing there.
Yeah, I could try to take that. And if Mike Flores, if you want to jump in, the idea there is there's a need for a new administration building at the wastewater treatment plant right now. They're packed in on their offices right now. That UV building or the UV unit within that same building will be decommissioned and we'll have a new UV building put up for that. And so we hope to use the existing UV area for storage spaces. We'll be determining the specifics on that during the design, exactly what we're going to repurpose that existing building for.
Got it. So where item 8 says new office building, that's where the conference room space is. So you're saying that we're on item 13 where it says existing administrative building improvements. That would be more for spaces, because item A on that says we're renovating that for repurposing into offices and or conference room.
I'm not following where you're at on the agenda.
75, there's item number 8 is that new office building. So it says approximately 1,000 square feet of office or conference room space. And then as you go down 4 items to option number 13, item A there says renovating existing UV disinfection room for repurposing space into offices and or conference room. So it appears, at least from what I'm looking here, that we're potentially having 2 different office areas / conference rooms at the wastewater treatment plant.
No, that's not the case. We're not going to have 2 different offices or 2 different conference rooms. Maybe that's a misprint there. But yeah, the idea is to take the existing administration building where they're packed in right now and repurpose that for something, whether that's for storage or maybe if there's need for an extra office space in there, and then have a new administration building that will have office spaces, maybe a small conference room, maybe that's up to be decided yet, and janitorial spaces, new restroom facilities, that sort of thing will go into the new administration building. So only one conference room, if any.
Hey, Dave, if I could have a minute, Trustee Gator, I think maybe a more significant answer to your question would be we need to add some room onto our lab. Right now, we're sending all of our samples out every week to pay to somebody else to do them. We have guys in-house that could run these labs. Our lab isn't big enough. Currently, we have 4 guys out there in one office. We don't have room for these guys. These guys don't have a place to eat lunch. They don't have a place to, do really anything. Our old UV system will be very well undersized for this new expansion. So we kind of thought that we could utilize that space for maybe some more lab room, maybe a place that we could have a true meeting, admin building where we could have a few more offices for some future staffing and stuff like that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Flores. I appreciate giving that explanation. That sounds good. The other questions that I had in design phase 1, there's several things where it talks about other contractors being brought in, geotechnical site surveys, things like that. And there's costs associated. Are those costs included in that 4.9 not to exceed that's included in that number?
Yes, sir. So that would be part of a subcontract that Jacobs would do with a geotechnical firm. So that number is included within the 4.9.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. And then I did notice also in design phase 2, there were several items where it said assist the town in different areas. And so it's just a question I have with this 4.9 that we're paying, how much of the work is being done by Jacobs? How much of the work is falling back on you and the town staff?
That's a tough one. Whether it's going to be a joint effort for sure amongst all of us. Jacobs will be the lead of the engineering. They will be the engineer on record, so they'll be doing a significant amount of the all the design work, preparation of drawings and specifications. The town will be involved with all of the planning meetings, all the design meetings, all the decisions, all the key decisions that need to be made. Bi-weekly meetings, I believe, is what we're looking at here. So the town will be in attendance on that, on those. Myself and all the plant operators and their experience will be relied upon heavily by Jacobs to forward the design. There are some process decisions that we'll need to make during the first 10 to 30% of design.
Okay.
So we'll be heavily involved with that.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Myers.
Anyone else? Okay, let's open it up to the public comment at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I have Mike that would like to speak. If you can state your name and address for the record and unmute yourself, please.
Okay, my name is Mike Backlund. I live at 8607 3rd Street.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. I was looking at attachment 3, fee estimate engineering services from Jacobs. And I guess my first question is to Dave. Did anybody really look at these billing rates? I mean, there are some handsome numbers there, and especially for some of the heavyweights up front of the company.
Yes, can I respond to that?
Yes, Dave, you can respond to that. Let's hear it.
Yeah, billing rates were something that we looked at pretty closely on that. The billing rates, they range anywhere from over $200 down to around $130. You know, for engineering expertise of this nature, that's kind of the fees that are out there these days for staff members of this experience level. We did talk with Jacobs on a couple of those staff personnel and their billing rates, and we negotiated 1 or 2 of those project team members to be positioned into a lower billing rate. That we were able to successfully negotiate with Jacobs on that. So the answer to your question, yeah, we did take a look at those very closely. In my experience, and I believe in the experience of everybody else here, I'll let Bob speak in a minute. Those rates are within industry standards for a technical design of this nature.
Yeah,
I
I
would
think
think so.
one of the questions I had was for instance, your manager, not the project manager, but your manager, he's got 2,434 man hours. I mean, you know, you've got a project manager and then you've got a senior advisor and an STC. I mean, there seems to me that the front end of the thing is just loaded with high priced billing rates.
Yeah, and we'll keep in mind too that this project is spread out over the next 4 years. And yeah, those, in my experience, all I can say is that's what I've seen. The project manager, I'm looking at that right now, design managers, I would expect to see those heavily involved in a project of this nature.
Okay, well, let me, my time is running short, so I don't want to keep you guys, but I worked for Bechtel Corporation for 16 years. I worked for Brown and Caldwell, which is also a wastewater company. And, you know, the last thing I want to say is, man, give me a CMAR contract any day and I'll nail you big time with change orders. I'll just nail you huge, because I'll send a guy, all he'll do is comb those drawings and look for problems, look for mistakes, and nail you with change orders big time. Because I've done it and know how to do it.
Well,
Okay.
we're going to hope to mitigate as much as possible by getting a good, qualified, trustworthy contractor. That's why we're going through the qualifications process that we are right now.
Show me an honest one out there.
There's a lot of them, Mike.
There are some.
Hey, I've worked with all of them, Troy. I know you worked in the industry as well, and I have for a long time.
They're all out to make money. I know that.
Absolutely.
We're gonna have to be on our toes. I'm a change order guy myself.
Yeah, you get.
So I understand.
That's how you make the money.
That's right. But they're good questions. I appreciate them.
Well, thank you, guys. You guys have a tough job.
It is tough. It's a big undertaking. It's a big project. One of the biggest ones this town's ever taken on.
Yeah, I wish that more planning had gone in and less building permits issued, because the town's got no water. It's a huge problem, and you guys have your hands full, big time.
Well, I know that. We've been spending a lot of time on this. Jacobs is a qualified firm.
I believe they are too.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Mr. Mayor, I see no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, we're going to bring it back to the board. Any other quick comments?
Mr. Mayor, this is Brad. As Dave indicated, he sent me the contract last week. The thing's 60 pages long. I've gotten through most of it, have some comments for him. If you're comfortable, what I'd like to do is have the board approve this, subject to staff or attorney review and town administrator review or approval.
I don't have a problem with it, as long as it's not going to sandbag the contract.
We're not going to slow the thing down. We just, what we'll do is we'll just point out to Dave my concerns and he and Bob decide what to do.
Some negotiating points. I get that. Absolutely. Enhance our position. I got it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Board members, can I get a motion to approve the wastewater treatment plant expansion with Jacobs here on this design phases?
I move that we authorize execution of contract with Jacobs Engineering Group in the not to exceed amount of $4,937,424 on a time and material basis for engineering design and construction services on the wastewater treatment plant expansion, subject to town attorney and town administrator approval.
Second.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item 3. This is resolution number 44-2020. This is a resolution adopting the new water rates that we've been batting around for quite some time with the public and within ourselves and staff. Judi? Yeah, turn
You're
your
on mute. You're on mute, Judi.
Judi.
How about now? We're good?
Gotcha. Yep.
Okay. So thank you, Mayor and trustees. The next 5 items are a collective work that we have been working on to get to the budget this evening. And so the first one is the water rate. And there had been a question earlier from one of the trustees. I wanted to point out that this is back in September 15th was the first special work session that we had on this. And at that point, we had discussed 3 options. And after lots of discussion going back and forth, that many of the trustees felt that it would be a little easier on the constituents if we phase this in. And so this is the second piece. The first phase went in effective October 1st. And this is the second piece of that. And so we actually, by going through and doing the fund balance policy, which we will talk about in a few, we're able to get that number down from 69 to 66. And if you'll remember, $16 of that is in fact the debt service piece on that. So I think we came out better than we thought. And so the only number on that resolution in front of you is actually the base rate change. So nothing else changed. We just felt that keeping the whole ordinance or the resolution together, all the rates are together, so you don't have to go back and reference what we did a couple months ago.
Board members, any comments on this?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I do have one comment. I know I'm not a board member. I think we need to change the caption on the resolution. The way it currently reads is it appears to was a caption for perhaps the when we were charging raw water fees. I think it needs to be, the caption is set forth in the agenda, which is just a resolution adopting water rates.
Fair enough. Anyone else?
I did have a question for town staff, and I know this is, I understand as we've been having this discussion for, well, I mean, the old prior board started this discussion last year, so this has been ongoing. But I know as we've gone through all the pricing options and worked through this year, and this is a question that's been brought to my attention by several of the citizens, is every time that we've had options that have been presented to the board, those have all been variations of a high increase to the base rate. And none of those options have included what if we were to do a less drastic increase in the base rate and to do a much larger increase in the tiers. And while personally I have 8 people in my household, so that would hurt me. I think that would actually work better from several standpoints. Number one, obviously my family that uses 8 people using water should be paying more for the water treatment plant than a family of 2, right? Because we're putting a lot more of a strain on that. And second, it does give the citizens the ability to, they can mitigate that a little bit. You know, they can adjust or, you know, change their water usage rates. You know, I can tell my teenage daughter she can't take a shower for 2 hours or, you know, whatever. But it also, I think, would help with addressing the concerns that we have every summer with water consumption. Is if we are putting more of that cost into those water rates, it could actually help to drive down our usage when we do get to those scary points of the year. If people are looking at their bill and saying, hey, I don't want that number to be as high. So I guess just the question would be is why haven't we considered doing more of that? Because from several of the citizens I've heard from, they would actually prefer that versus just having a huge base rate that they can do nothing about.
So I will answer in very general terms. And if we get too far into the numbers, I'll refer back to Tyler and Bob, because you are correct. These discussions started prior to my coming on board. So I'm not sure exactly what led up to it, but if you go in and you say fundamentally what we're trying to pay for is everybody to have an even playing field. Everybody is paying a base rate, and that allows you to be hooked up. That means, you know, everybody has that availability to come into their homes. I do think that in front of you, we're down the road a little bit. We are working on bringing to you more, trying to incentivize people to do on the consumption side, How much do you really need to water your yard? Do you want to do some xeriscaping? And I think that that will be an effort between Cody's department and finance and definitely Public Works. Mahela will be reaching out, trying to put some pieces together for us to communicate that, because those are long-term results. But I think when you look at your base rate, and I'm not sure what your consultants that brought this study to you, but that's generally is what you're trying to cover is your operation pieces with your base rates, and then your tiers will go and take care of your consumption side.
Well, this is Trustee Whitehouse. I mean, I think Mr. Sexton addressed this early on, and he certainly could probably speak better to this, but my recollection back a few months is I think we went over this ground, and the sense was that from his perspective at that time was the tiered rates really didn't have a great impact on the cost and the solvency of the water fund. But Mr. Sexton seems to be here. He's probably better qualified to answer.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's a good question, Trustee Whitehouse. So you're correct in that aspect of the whole idea when we set this thing up was, we have those three tasks that we were trying to accomplish, the three things that are driving the water rates, the water treatment loan at 1.6 million, and then the additional cap projects this year of $1 million, and then the water costs we were estimating at $2 million. And so if you were to just shift all that cost into the high users, they would start using less. That's natural. And so we wouldn't be able to recoup as much as those costs that we would need to offset those other loans. It's not just the water consumption, that's one piece. And so that is something we're looking at. And then when you look at the tier structure, our consultant, when he came to us, he recommended that we cut that back. But for the time being, with such large costs going out the door, and as you well know, we are running a deficit for 3-4 years. We needed to plug the hole immediately, and getting those base rates up to appropriate levels was task one. And then you need to relook at the tier rates. We have a 0 to 15,000 usage, and you look across everywhere else around Colorado, they stopped their tier rates at 3,000-5,000. Our average consumer is about 7,000 in the winter time, and so we have 7 months of summer, and then 4 months of the winter. The people aren't really using. We don't really see those high consumptions till July, August, September. We're not getting that kind of revenue that we expect, and so that's something we're looking at. I think it's with the new base model that we had. That's a nice thing that we can adjust to, but we were basically looking for equality, make it fair across the board, that everyone shoulders this, not just the water cost, the water, everyone takes their portion. And that was kind of the idea behind the base rates, a higher upfront. And then we work on that, education and conservation, which will shift the burden down, but we still have large capital costs that have to be paid for. And that's kind of why it's a balance. It's a balance.
Yeah, so, and I understand that, and my thought process is we've already done at least one set of increases to the base rate. We're looking at breaking out that loan payment portion, which would be the $16, and so that would cover the loan. I think a lot of the shift that we've already done from that 18 to the 35 should help with some of the other operational standpoint. But my thought process was, if we base the pricing and the tiers that we need to cover that operations based on what the winter usage is, and I mean, that would be a significant spike in our tiers, and that the reason there's not a significant hit from those is because they're so low. If I'm being charged $5 per 1,000 gallons and I'm only using 7,000 gallons, that's obviously not going to be a huge number. But when you add that number from 5 to 15 or 20, now all of a sudden that number becomes much more significant. So for example, if I'm using 10,000 gallons of water, I'm paying $5 per 1,000 gallons, I think is how it works now, or I might be off. So I'm paying $50 for that water. Well, if you increase that rate to $20 from 5, I'm now paying $80, which is actually more than that base rate would be. And then if I choose to back off of my water usage, then again, I have the ability to control a little bit of that, but it still allows us to bring in the funds, and it allows us to spread that a little more evenly, because the problem is we're hitting people, for example, that have homes that maybe aren't using water at all right now, yet they're going to see a spike from 18, which was obviously, we know that was too low, jumping to $66. for water they don't use. And so in some sense, we're actually punishing those that aren't using their water as much more than people such as myself who are heavy users of water, because we have a lot of people where my family of 8 is putting a lot more strain on the water treatment plant than someone whose house is sitting unoccupied. So there, it does make sense. And to me, it is fair that I should pay a higher burden of that cost than someone whose house is sitting empty.
I mean that's something we want to look at. It's in the plans. I don't believe, this model was delivered to us in April of this year. The first one was rolled out this last month, and I updated the model since then. So I think the progress that we've have taken so far are good steps, and I think that's something the next, like, we want to do is look at the tiers. Those tier rates will have to be evaluated on a smaller scale. It would have to be, somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000, or 1,000 to 5,000. The next one goes from 5 to 10, and then 10 to above, to capture all those revenues, because our users are not using, on average, are using 7,000. So you would have to get at least half. The reason why the consultant didn't use that in the first place is because we had so many in the lower tiers, and then you have high spikes in the summer times, and it's too variable to count on how much fixed costs that we currently have going out the door. So obviously that is something finance and Bob and everyone else is looking at, trying to get tuned in. But I think with the increases in this next rolling out, we can get more data to see where that sweet spot is. But yes, we are pushing for conservation. So
Trustee Gator, let me try to jump on this a little bit if I can. Tyler, you got 3 fixed costs that you got to pay for. And the cost of the water that we've been historically low priced for a long time here is not covering it. Now, they either raise the base rate to get it covered, or you're going to flip it over and you're going to raise the consumption rates to a high number to cover it. One or the other. You're going to do one or the other. We went down the base rate because it's too hard to understand what you need to cover these costs at this point. But the idea is to get it covered and then start to roll back as you understand more about the costs of our water and the consumptions throughout the year, and how you can adjust the rates versus the usage, and also adjust the base rate down. Is that a fair statement?
yes, I mean, like I said, it's one of the 3. So the water cost is probably half of our issue, and then the water treatment loan is a quarter of that, and then the capital projects are another quarter, because they're roughly, the whole fixed cost we need to cover is about 4.6 million. The water cost is half.
Yeah, and that increase occurred in a period of 12 months.
Correct. And
okay, so that's a hard one to understand and do in a tier rate study this quickly when you're bleeding dollars. And that's why I think they took the approach here to have a safe number that you can rely on to cover that until we can get those costs understood, if not reduced, in this coming year, and readjust this whole thing annually. Now, I think that's where we're headed, because I know that all of us want to see these numbers come down, all of them. And but you got to start somewhere. This was the easiest approach. Otherwise, you flip it over. You got to raise the usage rates, and we're going to pay for this water. Now,
absolutely.
That's just. I think that's just the approach that was taken here, John. Not that what you're saying isn't a better approach. I just think that it's hard to get a grasp on that, given the increases in the water that we sustained in 12 months. And I mean, high increases.
Right. And I can understand that, and I appreciate that. The one portion I would disagree with is that it's an easier approach. We know what our average users, we know how many users we have. We know what our average users use, and we've already taken steps to stop the bleeding, right? With coming up from the 18 to the 35. And I would even say, let's add that 16, right? The $16 to pay specifically for that water loan. And then just look at, okay, what is the deficit that we need? And then divide what our average water use is by that remaining amount, and say, this is the amount that we're going to increase the tiers. And with knowing that, okay, we're going to have people utilize less water, so that will come down a little bit, but it allows us, one, we're bringing in the funds we need to pay for the loan. We've already taken steps to stop the bleeding by raising the base rate. but we still have the opportunity to say we can make a portion of this a little bit more in the hands of the consumers, right? If you're like me, you got a family of 8 and you're not going to restrict water usage, my bill will probably be going up more than it would be the $66. But I have the option with that, and it allows us to give them a little bit more flexibility. That's my concern. Is I understand there's more studies that might go in, but I would disagree that it's not necessarily more difficult, because we already know what our average use is during the winter. And if we just base it off of those numbers, I think we may not be perfect, but we'll be by far and above where we were at 3 months ago. So we're already ahead. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. We're still better off than we were 3 months ago.
Well, this is Trustee Whitehouse. I mean, I think we have to look at one of the things that's out there is the Water Enterprise Fund is going bankrupt, right? I mean, we were hemorrhaging, I think it was what, $9,000 a day? It was the figure I came up with. I mean, we have to stop the bleeding, because we all know what happens if this thing goes insolvent. The state comes in, and yeah, I recognize this, but there's some pretty significant infrastructure costs that do have to get paid for. And I think that's what we're trying to do. I'm not sure it can all be done on the consumption side, but again, I'm not a water consultant, and I haven't looked at this as much as Mr. Sexton or Mr. Gowing. So I don't know. I mean, and the question to Ms. Tippetts is our budget for next year predicated on the passage of this resolution as it currently stands?
You are correct, yes. And the other thing is in the resolution, it specifically the last paragraph states that we will review this annually. And so it's to say if we had better information, but you are correct, at some point in time when you're hemorrhaging, we have to do something. We absolutely have to get in front of the debt service and the water and regroup, because we cannot continue to lose the money that we were where we were. I believe my number, I think that Tyler shared earlier, was 6,000, but I mean, whether it's 6,000 or 9,000 a day, it is not sustainable. And so we have to do something. And yes, the numbers in your budget are with the assumption that we would be at a base rate of 66, and the tier rates we'll continue to look at those.
I have a few points to make. First of all, I appreciate that we did consider a stepped approach for increasing water rates, because within this last couple of months, we've had the opportunity to review fund balances and debt service, more accurate numbers in order to come up with the next step that will potentially take care of us in the next year. So I appreciate that. That's my first point. The second point is that I really look forward to the conservation projects that we have upcoming, because that will allow us to take this feedback, Trustee Gator, that you have, and do the proper studies and calculations to determine what needs match what goals and how to participate with the community to encourage those goals through rates, specifically based on consumption. I think that's going to be a great opportunity to approach that in a way where we'll have the proper research and information available to make those changes needed the next time we make rate changes. The third point I want to put out there, and this is really important for all of our attendees currently, is that there is currently a utility fund available through the town of Wellington. If you are struggling to make payments on your utilities, whether they be water or otherwise, please go to the town website and submit an application for assistance with utilities that is currently funded through the town through our CARES Act monies. If you are struggling, you need to get that application in as soon as possible. And we want to be able to share those CARES monies to help you with your utility bills if you are struggling to pay or you are behind in utility payments. Okay, those are the three items I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
So I did want to ask a question, because I think I'm missing something here. Is there a rule that prohibits us from using the money collected through the tiers to pay for capital projects and or debt service?
No, sir.
Okay, So just if I'm just kind of going here based on my usage, I used roughly 13 last year is what last month was what I was billed for. And that was at roughly $5. If that were to double to go from 5 to 10, that would bring in an additional $65 on my water bill right there, which is actually more. So I'm trying to understand if we were to just do something again, it could be drastic on the rates, how that would not cover the expenses. I'm not saying we shouldn't raise and charge more. I'm saying let's shift it from the base rate to the tiers, because even I can't cut my water consumption by half. So let's say I cut 25% and I only use 10. Well, I'm still doing $100 in water, which is still an additional 45 something over, which is actually going to be more than it would be under the base rate in my case. So I guess I'm trying to understand when people say that we can't bring the money in by upping the rates. And I appreciate doing studies, but I think this, to me, this is a very simple mathematics, is we simply say, what are our average water users? What is the average water use in the winter months? And take whatever money we need to see come in for capital projects, debt service, and even I'm fine with saying we're just going to put the $16 straight into the base rate for the debt service, divide that number by the water we have used, and just say this is what we're currently changing the tiers to. And then we can evaluate that. It might not be perfectly right, but it should get us to level or pretty darn close to level. We will not be bleeding tens of thousands of dollars a day at that point if we're making a drastic change. So I guess I'm confused because I keep hearing if we go tiers, we can't do it. So I'm missing why we can't do it that way.
I can address that.
I guess.
So
go ahead, Tyler.
So
I mean, actually, Tyler, let me go ahead. Then if I'm wrong, then you can correct me. But here's my thought process on this, and listening to what you're saying, John, it makes sense. But the problem that I see personally with it is, and this is probably what the finance people are looking at too, there's too many variables that fall into those tiers, and there could be too many fluctuations in the usage. Now, if we all are paying an equal base rate to have water connected to our home, and we know, and so I know X amount, $16 is going to debt service, the rest of it's going to the operations, that is static. And then if we know that we're going to have water rates from, the water costs from North Poudre are going to increase, then we can adjust those. But so if we do tier changes, I don't know about you, but after the first month of our rates, the new base rate changing, my bill went from 74, which it's been for the last 5 years, to $84 or $94. It went up $20. I stopped pre-rinsing all of my dishes before I put them in the dishwasher. You know what my water bill was this month? $84. I saved $10 by stopping pre-rinsing. So using that as a premise, if we go to what you're talking about, if some people make just minor changes here and there, that will throw everything in chaos. And at the end of the year, we'll be right back where we were to begin with, because people will make those changes. That's just a example that I did. In 1 month, I saved myself $10 a month in my water bill by just simply stopping pre-rinsing my dishes before I put them in the dishwasher. So if you think of that, if everybody in town stopped because I know a lot of people, probably everybody pre-rinses. Everybody does that. There's $10 times 7,000 customers. There's the money you just lost that you thought you were going to gain in higher rates. So I understand the premise behind it, and I'm good with it. I think that it's something that needs to be looked at to help with conservation of the high water usage people, but just the average water usage people, you're not going to get any play one way or the other. It's just going to stay stagnant in my mind, but I may be wrong. That's all I have to think about that one.
Tyler?
No, I mean, that's absolutely correct. And just a little more background, the reason why we went that route was we hired a consultant from Word and Kern, and they came in and they told us, this is the route you guys need to go. You guys definitely could look at the tier structure later on, adjusting your tiers to a lower rate to help with the conservation. But they, in their professional opinion, told us, keep your tier structures, go to a higher base rate for now. when you're going down the road later on, that's something you want to do for the conservation to help drive those costs down. But this was just our first phase. This is the first approach at the water rates. This is something that hasn't been done in 10 years. So this is something all new to everyone. So.
Yeah. So my last comment, and then I've said my piece, but I can appreciate the studies and the professionals, but what is not being taken into account by this is the citizens of our town. We're talking to professionals and saying, what do you think we should say? What do you think we should do? That's not taking into account the people that are saying, I can't handle this. I want to have some ability to actually have control over this. And that's what I would like to see us do, is not be as concerned about, is it going to be more work for us? Is, can we achieve close, if not exactly what we want, but close to what we want, but do so in a way that works to the benefit of our citizens, not just taking into account what the professionals say.
I would argue that this is the best we're doing right now, what is best for the citizens, to make sure that we are able to provide this water service to them currently and into the future. That fits right into what you just said. This is the best right now for the citizens. Obviously, things might change next year or the year after or whatever. And obviously we just need to, we've made a commitment as a board to keep on top of this and reevaluate this on a very regular basis. So I think that is also the best for the citizens of this town. But the bottom line is, and we've gone over this a bunch of times in the past, that this is the best for the citizens at this point, because if we don't do these things, we're in deep trouble. The state's going to come in and rates are going to change, or, there's a lot of bad things that can happen if we don't just bite the bullet and do it now. And I know that it seems like it's painful at some points, but I mean, as my example, my bill for the last 5 years was $74. I have 5 people in my house. I have 3 women and 2 boys, and lots of showers are taken, and it's been consistent $74 within $2 up or down for the past 5 years. Last month, the first month of our new rates, it went up $20 almost exactly. And then I did my one little conservation piece in my house, and I saved myself $10 a month. So I'm just looking at the fact that we need to make sure that our fund that our balance, our enterprise fund is solvent now and in the future, because if it's not, then we're in trouble all the way around, and we're doing a disservice to our citizens by not having a solvent enterprise fund for water. So
I have to agree with Trustee Jerome, and the thought that we haven't taken the consideration of the citizens in our case is not true. I mean, we have been working on these numbers and these models with great argument for months and months, with the intention of being able to provide a sustainable service that is our responsibility, while making it as palatable as possible for everybody in our community. So to say that we haven't considered the citizens is not fair. We did choose to take a step approach as well to make it as sustainable as possible to get an increased amount earlier in order to not have to make it as big if we waited till the end of the year. So although I understand this is a strain, and it hurts me to know that we're increasing bills for households across the town, it is the utmost important thing for us to do to provide water to our community. And it is an investment, and we are improving water, bringing it to requirements and being able to sustain it for our population. So I can't agree with the fact that with the statement of we haven't made the consideration for our citizens.
Fair enough on that. I think we've all got the citizens on our minds, and John's just trying to take a more direct approach, and I appreciate it, both Jerome and Trustee Gator. And we've been over this a lot, and this is a quick zero reset, if you want to put it that way. Reset. Don't keep in mind that we are we are working on our water portfolio. We are working on our costs. We are working on our quality. We are working on things for the future. And if you flip it over, all you're going to do is you're going to get the money. We're just going to raise the prices across the board on the tier rates to cover it up, and you're going to adjust rates every month. So we're going to have to get there one way or the other. And yes, it might be more to whoever's using the usages on the consumption rates basis, but we have to get to a reliable base rate. This is a reliable base rate at this time. In another quarter, and keep in mind, water is a commodity too. It can go up and down. It has done both. And this is the approach that we've had to take to get there. And I think this was the more palatable approach, given the other scenarios that we have sent around to the public, to the board, to bat around. It's not a happy topic at all, but it's the quickest, best approach. And within the market out there, up and down the Front Range, I don't think it's out of line with other municipalities. And if I recollect on what we were looking at, some people that I know pay $125 a month in other municipalities, just down the road. So it's we've had to come to grips with this thing, and that's what we're going to do as a board. We're going to keep trying to figure out how we can enhance this position for the citizens and bring this cost down, the base rate, which is tied to a lot of things. So with that, I'd like anyone else.
Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, can I make a comment? I mean, it's not really an apples to apples comparison, because if you look at some place like Fort Collins, they've got a much broader water portfolio than Wellington does.
I know that.
And they started 100 years ago. We're really catching up, and we have really one source of water. And so we are kind of tied to that share price. That's part of our contract. So, and of course, Fort Collins has a plant that'll turn out as much water as our plant in about an hour and a half. So there's an economy of scale there
That's
as well.
right.
So I think that needs to be weighed in as well.
But I wasn't really comparing us to Fort Collins. There's other areas that are smaller than that, but you're absolutely right. And when they do a water treatment expansion, it's big. Okay. I don't, today, seems like the most logical approach to fixing this problem till we can put our studies to it over the course of the next year and get some things done that we're working on. So that's where I'm at with it. Anyone else care to weigh in?
Well, I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. This is Trustee McDonald. Trustee Gator is correct. We don't necessarily always have to hire consultants to do these water studies. We can rely on staff. But that was the decision that this board made, was to hire a consulting firm to give us a recommendation on how to approach our water rate situation. So based off the recommendation and the information that we were given, we came up and developed a plan that now our budget has been based off of. And so we have to make a decision tonight. So I appreciate Trustee Gator's alternative approach, but we really have to focus on passing our budget, coming up with conservation efforts, because like Trustee Jerome mentioned, just minor modifications to how we live can make a big difference. And what our citizens really need right now is stability. And if we're messing with their water bill and changing their rates, people that live on a budgeted income are going to really struggle if something like their water bill continues to fluctuate and change. So as a board, whatever we can do to provide stability to our citizens, I think is extremely important right now. I understand that we have to increase our rates to take care of some water issues that we have, but something that we have to keep in mind too is if we keep adjusting the bill over and over, that's not good for our citizens either. They need stability, especially during a time like this. So I just, a couple of points and a couple of comments to take into consideration as we're moving forward making this decision. Thank you, Mayor Hammond.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. Any other board members? Okay. Let's offer it up for public comment.
Mayor Hammond, we have Christine Gator. If you can state your name and address for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Christine Gator, 8132 4th Street. in the budget, whoa. I couldn't see what I'm looking at. In the budget item with the water fund, we have 11 million in tap fees, which go to pay for the 7 million in the loan. So couldn't we then get rid of the capital fee on our bill since we already have the tap fees to cover that amount?
Who can answer that one? Judi, can you answer that?
Do we want to, during public comment, or do you want me to reach out to Christine tomorrow? I went over quite a few budget items
Okay.
today.
Well, all right, Christine, do you have any other comments on the issue, or is that the only one?
I would like to go tier instead of base rate, but other than that, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mayor Hammond, we have Christine Ramirez. If you could state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Kristen Ramirez, address 7392 Viewpoint Circle. I am on the board of HOA here in the community, and we have rather larger lots here in the town, in the community. And I was just wondering, how are you guys going to communicate with the HOAs if people don't want to water their lawns going forward with the price increase?
That's a decent question. When it comes to water restrictions, HOAs, as I understand, have to follow the enforcement as well. But when it's not, and people don't want to water the lawns, that's an interesting point. Viewpoint's got the larger lots. Are those on wells over there?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think they are on wells. So I don't think that's, I don't think those big lots over there are getting municipal water. I could be
Okay, yeah,
wrong.
I'd have to, I'll have to check into that, just because that's an issue that we're coming into, is the fact that now that, water rates are being, and that was something that came across with our board meeting for our community, HOA community, just that people are not, happy, and how are we going to go about as a HOA, finding these people or sending out notifications because they've let their lawn go.
That's something that we're going to take into consider, write down and think about.
So, and that I think that's just the biggest thing, is just, trying to communicate with us, the HOAs, all of the HOAs that it's going to affect, to try and come up with a plan, because as of right now, if people are not, watering their lawns or what and have you, that's technically considered a violation per the HOA because of the covenants. So going forward, how do we go about that if people, either one, can't afford it, or two, are just not wanting to water the lawn? So that is something that we have come across as a board of a HOA.
Well,
this is, go ahead, Troy. I was just,
go ahead.
I was going to speak up, Troy.
Go ahead.
I guess that's something I've heard before, and I guess I don't know which. This is Trustee Jerome, by the way, Kristen. I don't know which HOAs in town have non-pot versus the ones that do have potable or are using potable water. But I guess the HOAs that do not have their own irrigation system, that are, their residents are using town water, I guess I would challenge those HOAs to reevaluate their covenants on their landscaping requirements. And I think that would be something that the HOA would have to decide as a group, and possibly change your covenants to make it less stringent, or make it more water conservative measures for yards. that's not something that the town can tell a HOA to do. Those are, separate entities. This town board and the town of Wellington and all of its employees cannot tell individual HOAs how their covenants are to be handled. So I guess I would, look for the HOAs that are not using irrigation, their own irrigation system, but relying on town water to look at your covenants as far as, what they say about your yards and things, and maybe figure out how to amend them or change them to make them a little more friendly to the residents, and then make it so they can, be creative with their landscaping and maybe not have to water as much.
Well, this
Absolutely.
is
And
oh, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to just agree that that's probably right. And just the fact that at this point, I think, with the HOAs, maybe just making sure that the front of the house, is in somewhat good condition as far as the grass and whatnot goes, and finding out, like you said, about the water. And because, like I said, our lots are pretty on the bigger side here, and my bill runs anywhere in the summertime because I have, lawn doctor coming in and watering it, and everybody wants green grass, right? And for it to look nice, but I'm not going to pay $300, for my water to make my yard look amazing. So, exactly. We might have to, the board of the HOA may need to look at that and say, maybe, just the front of the lawn needs to be, and not necessarily the back. I'm not sure. That's just something that has come up with our residents here that, we just need to know how we need to go about it as far as the board goes and HOA and then the community.
Sure. No, I get it. And, we don't have any town ordinances that I'm aware of that requires anybody in town to have a green lawn. I think the only ordinances we have is about weeds and stuff like that. So, that's something that would have to be worked out by each individual HOA in my opinion. I don't know if Brad needs to chime in on that, or if anybody else has an opinion, but that's my understanding of the HOA system. Is they're the ones that set those guidelines and rules for their own community. So
I'd like to make a comment. I believe if you're in a state, and Mr. Gowan could probably, or Mr. Bird could probably address this more accurately. My understanding was that if you're under a water emergency, I don't know if that's by the state, there are state laws that supersede HOA covenants about if you're under mandated watering restrictions, that the HOA covenants about maintaining your lawn to a certain standard are not in force. But I don't know if Mr. Bird could or somebody could address that.
Well, that's true, Trustee Whitehouse.
That would address if we have watering restrictions, but that wouldn't address it if someone didn't want to water their lawn because of an astronomical spike in.
No, that's right. That's got to come up too. That's going to be an HOA thing.
Okay. So yeah, that's something that we probably, as an HOA, need to, talk about, or, maybe they need to be aware of that. The HOA committee, the company needs to be aware of that when we do go into water restrictions or whatnot, that they can't be giving out restrictions to, households if, their lawn is dead or whatnot.
If I might, and this may be something that the board just wants to sit down with homeowners associations generally. As the board's aware, there are associations that have potable, non-potable water systems. Some do, some don't, and that's scattered throughout the town. There also are requirements under what's called Kiowa, which is the Homeowners Association Act, that address water restrictions. And it may make sense to sit down and just perhaps have a meeting with all the homeowners associations and talk through some of those issues. Certainly, if the board is so inclined as we get into next spring's watering season, that may be something we want to look at in more detail if we have continued water restrictions, which are likely.
Mr. March, in my real estate experience, from a lot of the times that these developments were established, the recorded covenants had restrictions and requirements as to how much grass or how much xeriscaping. And since then, the HOA Colorado law has changed, and now the law prohibits HOAs from writing covenants that forbid or limit xeriscaping or from being able to use turf or those kinds of things. So I think that addressing those concerns directly with the HOAs and revisiting some of those covenants, I think is probably going to be one of the more effective ways to go. So I would be supportive of Mr. March taking that proactive approach to work with the HOAs to try and address this on a community-wide scale.
Probably makes sense to look at that. And thank you, Trustee McDonald. I think you're absolutely right. Probably makes sense to look at that as we get closer to the spring watering season next year, and we'll try and put that on the calendars.
Okay, yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to also too is people are looking at mature trees, their grasses, the lawns when you're picking a house to buy. And I think that's what's unique about our community, separate from everywhere else, is just that, you know, the lot sizes, the tree sizes versus, like she said, you know, going into getting rid of grass and whatnot.
Well, that's something that we're going to have to take up. Absolutely, especially in the spring. Thank you for your comment, ma'am.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Mayor, we have no other public comment at this time.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board, please. Any final comments?
Just my last comment is just for clarification, because I do believe that there are other options that we could have explored and have chosen not to achieve the results that we need. I am in agreement that we do need to get the water fund to stop leaking money. I think there's another way to do that. So because of that, I will be voting no, and that's all.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor Hammond, are you looking for a motion?
Yes, I guess I just wanted to one more time if there's anything else, but yes, I'm going to look for a motion here in a minute.
can we confirm that that motion just changes the caption to a resolution adopting water rates?
Yes, we can. Does anyone want to take on this motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution number 44-2020, a resolution adopting water rates.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
No.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Great, we'll move on. Resolution number 45-2020. This is a resolution adopting the fund policy balance. Judi?
Thank you, Mayor. The next resolution is, we took everything that we saw in our PowerPoint and put it into a formal policy. So, and just review just the topic. We talked about the purpose of why we did it. We talked about the minimum levels and what would impact that. And if something happened, we talked briefly about how we would have a replenishment strategy and how long that would be.
Did you hear me?
And then we spoke briefly about the order of expenditures, of the what order we would spend down the funds. And so the part that becomes important to this is we came and we're going to do away with the old policy. And we thought that after revisiting this, it would definitely help the water fund, but it was also trying to help out the citizens in all of the funds. And so we're going to do the town of Wellington at a minimum will maintain unrestricted budgetary fund balances of no less than 4 months, which is 33%, or our regular operating expenditures, or 110% of debt service, whichever is greater. And that's in italics on the attached fund balance policy that is attached to the resolution. And so no new information here. This is just the information that we had visited about previously, and we said that we would formalize it and bring it to the board.
Okay, comments, any board members? Okay, We'll open up to the public, please.
Mayor Hammond, I see no public comment at this time.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve resolution 45-2020, a resolution adopting the new fund policy balance?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
I vote yes. Pardon
you.
me.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond,
Yes. Okay, we're going to skip and go to item. Make sure I got this right. We're going to go to item 7. Ordinance number 19-2020. This is an ordinance adopting the town budget for 2021.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. This is, again, comes with all the work that we've been doing for months and months. And so I did do a very brief memo for you with the changes. So this is the same information you saw on the 24th of November. And we had a few updates that we had changed. We increased the building material from the last time that you saw these documents to be more reflective. Thank you, Cody, of the building permits that we were had talked about using for the water plant. The property tax revenue was tweaked just a tiny bit because we got new updated valuations from Larimer County. And on the expenditure side, at a request from one of our trustees, we are going to increase some funding inside of the legislative budget for volunteer appreciation. So we increased that line item by 5,000. And then still in front of you this evening is more conversation regarding the Harrison House expansion. And so we tweaked that number as well because we had new information. And then we also decreased one of our items on the town hall. Again, just knowing that where we were at and more information as we move along. And then we did have one correction that I missed. I picked it up on your cover sheet, but I neglected to pull the actual physical sheet, which was the mower. And that will be referenced in the capital improvement plan from last week. I neglected to pull it from your packet. So it is correct on the cover sheet, did not pull the individual sheet. And so with that, if you want me to go through, but I would also like some clarifications as I had one of the questions come, why the top part estimating revenues, why those numbers do not tie out to the budget. Well, they do, but if it's important to recognize that first sentence says estimated revenues and funds available. Those funds available include your fund balances, also any kind of grants that we have on there. So it is, it does very much tie to your budget, which was asked earlier today. It's just not a single line item. It comes together. And on the lower portion, your estimated expenditures, they very much tie out to your individual funds. And so from our meeting on the 24th, those are your changes.
Okay. Comments, concerns, board members?
So I did have a couple of items that I do have some concerns with in the budget, and I brought both these up, so these are not new. I still would prefer to see us go the route of budgeting for a manager of Parks and Recreation together for the whole year versus doing the director position. I know we were looking at the very least looking midway through the year and then reevaluating, but my understanding is that if we fund the position, the board has made a decision one way or the other on that. So that is a concern that I have, as well as the town studies. I know, again, we had discussed the potential of pushing some of those off until later in the year. But again, I would prefer to see us actually take the time to utilize the town staff, the boards that we have. I know at least one of the boards that I've spoken with already was enthusiastic about the idea of being able to take on some of those studies and things that we need that we're not ready to take on right now. And I would like to see us remove those from the budget. Those are, for the moment, those are the concerns that I have with the budget.
Well, John, Trustee Gator, if we just approve them, it doesn't, I don't think it necessarily means we have to use them. Is that?
It is correct, but at that point, it is from the board standpoint, it's now up to staff standpoint so again, right, my job, I try not to, my job is not to sit over Patty's shoulder and tell her what she and her staff should do. It's when we set the budget, we're telling her, this is what we're giving you the funds to do. So in essence, we as the board are saying, here's the funds, you may use it. Now, if they choose not to use it, which my hope would be that we don't, but again, my responsibility as a trustee is if I feel that we shouldn't be doing something, this is my chance to actually have an impact on that. So that's why I'm bringing it now.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Regarding,
other comments?
Yeah, regarding both the director position for Parks and Recs and also regarding the studies, in my mind, it is very important to have those professional studies because it gives us an opportunity to learn from best practices across other municipalities, which also include cost savings measures for long term. And then also following a specific vision so that monies aren't spent outside of intentional use that follows our vision. So in my mind, those studies are very important for actual cost savings in the future, not just for this next year, but following for a long-term future for Wellington. So those items do have an expense. I do appreciate that we have provided the direction to use that later in the year, pending our financial situation. But I think that those are very valuable, kind of the spend a little money up front in order to save it later.
Other comments? Okay, just to follow up with our two trustees, and both points are absolutely valid. I'm of the mindset to keep the momentum up. If we don't need the money, we won't use it. I trust staff to use their discretion and do, that's what they're hired for. They're professionals as well. And we can, as trustees, we're going to be monitoring all the time. So I'm satisfied with what we have here to move forward. Obviously, I want to use as much town talent as possible with our boards and volunteers and people that we have that want to participate as much as possible in here, not just to offset the money, but so that they can be a part of it. That's what it's about being in a small town. That's why we're going to approve $5,000 for volunteers appreciation in here. And I really appreciate the trustee that brought that up. I think that's that Trustee Gator that brought that up. I appreciate that. I think that's well overdue. Okay, so if there's no more board comment, I'd like to turn it over to the public.
Mayor Hammond, I see no hands raised at this time.
Point of information, I see Christine Gator has her hand raised right now.
Crystal, is that true?
Yes, she does.
Okay. All right, let's hear it.
Christine, if you can state your name and address for the record, you'll have 3 minutes.
Christine Gator, 8132 4th Street. For the election, Trustee McDonald was talking about it before she got elected, about the election being in person versus a mail-in election. And I think we should do that, especially with a divisive topic of marijuana coming up, just for security of the election, as well as it's cost less to do. And then my other thought is about the recreation program, the department in general. I was thinking that it should be self-funded, just like the water enterprise fund is. So the operation expenses are covered by the revenue that is brought in. And if that's not the case, then we need to increase the revenue. This is several reasons why. One is you guys say that you guys want to promote businesses into our town. And I know of businesses in Fort Collins, such as Mountain Kids, that is a recreational program. And they're not going to be coming into our town because we have a subsidized recreation program, which means the prices are a lot less, and something like Mountain Kids cannot compete against. So we are actually doing the opposite and disincentivizing, I don't know what the word is, businesses, at least the recreational side, from coming into this town because our prices are too low. So if we actually had it, it paid for itself, and that means we increase the revenue, we increase the costs of the program, then other business could come in and compete against that. And then we could phase it out as private businesses come in and take that over, so that we can increase businesses in the town and have the services for the public. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Other comments?
We have no other hands raised at this time.
We'll bring it back to the board at this time. No other further comment. Can I get a motion to approve ordinance number 19-2020, an ordinance adopting the budget for the town of Wellington, Colorado for 2021?
So moved.
Sorry, I did have a question. I don't know if it's relevant. Sorry, am I too late?
Kinda.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been seconded.
Too late. Motion's on the table.
Sounds
It's been
good.
seconded.
All right. Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, we're going to flip back to item 5. This is an ordinance number 21-2020. This is an ordinance appropriating sums of money to defray expenses and liabilities. This is something I believe we do every year. It's kind of standard. Judi, you want to tell us all about it real quick?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The appropriation budget is the same numbers that you just saw in the prior ordinance. It actually gives us the authority to spend those funds. So it's the identical numbers that you saw before, but it's just appropriating for spending.
Okay. Any questions on what this means here?
So,
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I apologize. Go ahead.
Trustee-
so I'll ask my question. This is just, I had been told at some point that we had received an expanded contract for public safety from Larimer County Sheriff's Office. I was under the impression we were actually supposed to see that today, yet I did not. I have yet to see any updated contract. So I just wanted to make sure that in the budget we just passed, that we are adequately funded, or I don't know what ever happened with that. That was my question that I forgot to ask. So I don't know if that's appropriate for this item as well.
If I may, yes, we addressed that with Kelly and I both looked at that contract, and the funding that you have inside of there, we did not pick up the additional. They had wanted to add an additional officer. We wanted to wait and give the new town administrator the opportunity to review that contract. I believe they will be bringing that back to you as well. But I thought with her coming on so quickly following this, that if she could have an opportunity to review that, it would be helpful. So the money that you see inside of there is the exact number that they asked for. They eventually want to get up to a 9% overhead, allowing us the opportunity to get there. So we picked up 3% of that this year.
And that contract will be on your next agenda on the 22nd.
Okay, so we approved basically similar to what we had last year plus 3%, or I guess I'm a little confused as to what we approved.
They're the same positions that they wanted to add an additional officer, which then came with an additional car, et cetera, et cetera. And so our question was, since we were at the time, definitely looking at our own staffing positions. Could we get, stay where we were at until the new town administrator came on board and had an opportunity to review that?
Okay, so we basically are staying with the current contract as of the moment.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, let's take it to the public.
Mayor Hammond, I see no hands raised at this time.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to approve ordinance number 21-2020? This is an ordinance appropriating the sums of money to defray the expenses and liabilities.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 21-2020, an ordinance appropriating sums of money to defray expenses and liabilities.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on back over to item number 6. This is ordinance number 20-2020. This is an ordinance levying general property taxes for the taxable year 2020. This is something we see every year as well. Judi?
Thank you, Mayor. So you are correct, and I will just get down to the meat of it. In the side of the general fund, we're just doing the same amount of mills. I went back as far as 2012, so it's 12.439 mills. We received our updated valuations on the 24th of November. So this is our final number. And inside of the water fund, we have 2 pieces that were passed in 1982 and 1984. So that 0.703 mils is for that debt service. And so those will fall off in the next 2 years when those pieces of those water, if you remember from one of our discussions on water, we have those loans that are stacked. So the 82 and the 84 will both be paying off here shortly. And then those mills will fall off. So it's just, you're correct. It's the same as the prior year. You're just a little bit less because our debt service is spread out with more people. So.
Right. Any comments on this item?
I just want to clarify, because I think you just answered my question, Ms. Tippetts. So the reason that the mill this year is less than last year is because the way that our debt service is spread out among the citizens. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Let's open it up to the public, please.
Mayor Hammond, I see no hands raised at this time.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board then. Can I get a motion to approve ordinance number 20-2020? This is an ordinance levying the general property taxes for the taxable year 2020.
So moved.
A second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, moving on, item 8, contract approval, 3749 Harrison Avenue expansion. Ms. Hodling, Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and Board of Trustees. Before you tonight is the expansion of 3749 Harrison Avenue. As you can recall, this project started earlier this summer as we were looking for space to be able to accommodate our growing staff. We're currently housed in 5 different offices through downtown area, and this would be an option to be able to extend when we need to be able to build town hall. We went with a 2-story option, if you recall, and that will be able to accommodate 31 of our employees. So you'll see in the packet tonight the design build contract. So if you're not familiar with that, this type of project integrates one team. And so it's one contract between the town and the builder. There are a variety of advantages of this type of project delivery method. Faster delivery, there's cost savings because you're really integrating your consultants with your architect, your constructor. And so there's a lot of value engineering that can go on with that type of project. And you can see the other additional benefits as well. But knowing that there's an urgency behind this type of project, knowing we've got to get space for our staff because we're already at capacity, this is the project delivery method that we're going with. So how is cost determined? I know there might be some questions about how come there was that a little bit over $1 million included in the contract, and why is the not to exceed amount 1.3 million? It's because we're still working through the design phase. So there is a schematic design, there's design development, and then there's construction documents, which have a lot more detail of, once you're really narrowing that down. And we'll get better price generated through each one of those phases. So again, like I mentioned, you'll see that that number, that's an estimate in the contract tonight, but there's still things that are unknown that we will work over that design phase to get solid numbers on. So there's things like the existing bathroom and kitchen of the current house that would likely need to meet ADA standards. We don't have those numbers yet. There's rewiring of the old house and the roofing, which will need to be addressed. There's IT throughout the building. There's windows, fixture, furniture, and we also talked about the elevator aspect. We're looking at doing a lift, which is cheaper rather than a full elevator, but that will allow us to have some flexibility. Should we keep that property, or should we sell that property or rent it in the future? And then also tree removal on site. And then a great unknown, which is Excel undergrounding, which we'll have to do if you look in that back alley. So there's things that are still outstanding at this point. Of course, we want to be the most cost efficient and effective and have a solid delivery with this type of project. But we know that there's some unknowns, and we'll work always to get the cost down. We're not trying to exceed that amount, obviously, and we're trying to be very efficient and effective with our time and resources. Our estimated schedule at this point would be construction. Well, let me back up. This, of course, would go through our normal design process and go to the Planning Commission. I know that was a concern of the community and the board. We will not be jumping over that step. We'll treat this like any other project that we have. And then assuming pending that approval, the construction would start in February. Construction duration would be about 16 to 20 weeks. And then looking at that project completion between mid-May and June. So there's a lot that can change, obviously, with construction schedules and delivery, but that is what we're looking at right now to date. Are there any questions?
Yes. 4 months? That's pretty ambitious.
We have a solid team in place, and I feel very confident about everyone's abilities.
Yep. Okay. When we go before the Planning Commission, we've taken into account parking, right? Because that's what they're going to ask about.
Yep, that was a piece, of course, that we have to address, and that's something that we'll be looking at and part of the consideration for this project.
Okay, that's all I got. Anyone?
Just one thought / concern I have is, obviously I understand we have a lot of things outstanding. The concern is that we currently stand at $1 million. We have a lot of outstanding things that we're waiting on. It sounds like change orders to come in and adjust that. Well, when we know the not to exceed amount is 1.3 million, it generally tends to be very easy for those change orders to add up to that 300,000. What processes do we have in place to try and manage that so it doesn't just become something that we end up hitting that cap if we don't actually have to, just simply because that cap is known?
That's through the design process that we're working on. That's why they're that design build process. The town has to give approval, at every single phase of that. So if there's something that's proposed that we know, you know, either could save us money or will blow the budget, that's where staff steps in and will say, you know, that would be a nice to have, but not a needed type of consideration. So that's that constant back and forth that we're working through the whole design team to ensure that we're being efficient with our dollars.
Anyone else?
Very real quickly, this is Brad. One of the things we've gone back and forth on this contract. And this is just to advise the board and make sure we got a little bit of leeway. On 2.3.17, we added a phase 1, which was the idea behind that was we'd better hone the documents and the budget, some of those kinds of things. 2.3.17 refers to article or section 11.1.1. We'll probably change that just for the board's info to just say Article 11. If you look at the contract as is currently drafted, there's 2 sections 11.3, for example, and we probably need to clean that up. So you might just give this approval subject to Kelly's okay for the final contract.
Okay. Anyone else? Let's open it up to the public, please.
Mayor Hammond, I see no hands raised at this time.
Bring it back to the board then. Can I get a motion to approve the contract approval of 3749 Harrison Avenue expansion for the town hall?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
Yes.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, Kelly, 4 months. Let's see it.
Thank you.
Gotta get past Bert. All right, last one. Item 9. So resolution number 46-2020. It's a resolution granting extension of approval of annexation of Country Lane Acres. And then we've seen this and heard this name several times. Cody.
Good evening, Mayor. Cody Bird, Planning Director. I'll be very brief with this one. The applicant and owner of the property that has been approved for annexation has requested an extension to allow additional time to work out the details of an annexation agreement. This has been postponed once before by resolution of the board, granting that extension, and the applicant has requested that additional time. We proposed 6 months to ensure adequate time to negotiate the topics that are remaining and to allow some flexibility for some of the family matters that the applicant has been dealing with. So humbly, the staff on behalf of the applicant requests approval of an extension for 6 months.
Board members, any comment? Okay, let's open it up to the public, please.
Mayor Hammond, I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Can I get a resolution to approve resolution? Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 46-2020? This is a resolution granting an extension to the approval of an annexation of Country Lane Acres.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Jerome,
No.
trustee Kenny,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to go back an item we popped over to the end here. Everybody's hanging there. We're getting there. Cody, you want to do a comprehensive plan update? Can you?
I would be glad to do that. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to start a screen share with the presentation.
Okay.
All right. Can you see the screen all right with the slides?
Yep.
Perfect. I'll try to keep this brief because I know we're running pretty late, but we felt it was important to give the board an update on the comprehensive plan and land use code updates that are currently underway. Just to kind of frame what I'm going to be sharing with you, I'll give you kind of a rundown real quick on the progress to date. Community engagement, we've done some outreach to our citizens, and we've got some of the results that are helping guide and shape the draft document that we're working on. We identified the downtown as a very specific component of our comprehensive plan for the community, and so I'll highlight that, as well as some of the transportation considerations that are currently underway and where we're headed in that direction. And then I'll wrap it up with some next steps for how we're rolling the rest of this project out for the public. So here's a snapshot of our timeline and the tasks that we've been taking on. As you might recall, this project kicked off early this year in January, which was, of course, right before COVID-19 pandemic struck our country. Admittedly, we've had some delays because of that pandemic, and we've had to readjust the engagement outreach strategies that we employed, since our traditional strategies are usually public meetings, gatherings that have been restricted. So we've gone to a mostly digital format, but we do feel like we've gotten good feedback, good comments and responses from the public that are helping to shape and guide this plan effort. So we're very pleased with the responses that we've got. There's some additional opportunities for further public comments to come. And you can see currently where we're at right now. Here in December, we're giving you an update right now. The steering committee is reviewing the draft goals and policies that have been prepared, and staff is continuing to put together that draft plan. We'll anticipate having that final document out here in December or January, public comment for a month or two, and then we'll compile all those final results for plan adoption. And right on the heels of the plan adoption, you can see below is the land use code process, which we're working on behind the scenes. We're doing a lot of cleanup. We've identified some challenges that need to be addressed in our code, and we'll be rolling out the land use code updates in a draft version shortly after the comp plan adoption. So that's our general snapshot of where we've been and where we're headed. And I'm going to circle back to this, these key dates at the very end of the slide presentation. That's just my reminder to share that with you. So let's talk a little bit. I'll share kind of the public engagement that has happened to date. As I mentioned, we've had to go largely digital format, but despite that, we've had really great responses to our online questionnaires, polls, surveys, social media efforts. 660 responses to our digital format, which is really pretty good. We did have 61 stakeholder interviews. Those were in-person interviews that occurred just before COVID. And so we did get some good, meaningful feedback from individuals that way. And of course, we've got a very dedicated steering committee that's helping in this process. And they've been very diligent about attending meetings and reviewing drafts to date, with a little bit of homework still to go. So they've been very engaged in this process. We're thankful for their input, as well as everyone else who's shared comments. Just some of the ways that we've reached out to the public. We've done a lot through digital social media campaigns. Several polls have been posted. We also put out some posters and flyers around town. We distributed flyers inside the books that were being checked out from the library. We had some coasters that we put out at some of our restaurants and breweries with a QR code and a website link to go and respond to some of the questions that we posed. And most recently, we put out some additional information cards with, again, links to our websites and our social media campaigns, and some Halloween bags that were distributed here on Main Street. So we've taken all that public engagement that we've been getting from our residents, and really we've kind of ferreted that down into these kind of distilled themes. These are the majority of comments that we're hearing from those responses. And what we've kind of identified as the leading themes are community character. Nearly everyone, literally, says that the small town feel, that small town character is extremely important for Wellington. And a lot of individuals also said that the agricultural heritage of our community is really important too. So that's a leading theme. A lot of comments about supporting the businesses and having a local economy. The downtown, as I mentioned, was a critical piece of our RFP effort, and that's been reiterated from the public comments that we've received. So that's definitely in here as well. Community spaces, events, 4th of July parade's a big one that has been commented upon. So really looking for ideas and ways to build on those activities. Of course, our outdoor spaces, recreation has been a big theme, and last and not least, certainly, but sustainable public services from our water systems, wastewater systems, public utilities, and governance. So those were certainly the 6 overriding themes that we heard most comments on. We took that input, there we go, and we narrowed it down just a little bit further into what we're calling our 4 pillars. These are the 4 categories that are really going to be the emphasis behind this draft plan that we're preparing. We kind of called that community pride, thriving economy, historic and vibrant downtown, and sustainable and resilient public services. Those 4 overarching categories really capture the bulk of what we're hearing from the community. And staff agrees that these are very good pillars to build our community upon. In the middle there, you see the draft community vision statement that we used our steering committee for input. We put a draft out for public comments. We received some feedback on that. We refined it a little bit. And this is where we're at today. There's still a little bit more time to further refine that. But I think we're really on the right track to capturing what this community really feels we need to be in 20 years. So that's what we've been working on that overarching theme. I'm going to share with you now the next couple of slides, highlight some of the poll questions and the responses that we got, asking specific questions. We're not sharing all the data tonight. I've got all of the results. If anyone cares to dig through those, let me know. But really, I just wanted to highlight the kind of the top 3 or top 2 in a few slides here. So we asked a range of questions about the entire town, about the downtown specifically, about transportation, building image and appearance. And I'll highlight some of what we heard. So this first one was we asked what types of buildings the community would like to see in the downtown. And you can see that I'll highlight too, the percentages are not going to add up to 100. So don't try it. It's really, that percentage is based on the percentage of respondents who could have selected that answer. That's the percentage you're seeing. They won't equal 100, so don't worry about the numbers. But what that did tell you is that a large number of respondents felt that for our downtown buildings, they wanted to see more patios, more functional rooftops, these are 2 probably categories that we might be seeing some appeal from the needs of the community in response to the pandemic. Businesses needing outdoor seating to meet those health code requirements was a prevalent theme when this poll question was put out. So we try to temper the results of the survey with some of the situational circumstances, but certainly we do still think it's valid that these are things that will resonate with the community for years to come, not just during a pandemic. And then there's also been a strong desire for identifying critical or historical structures that are worth preserving and rehabilitating. That was a strong theme in several of our polls. Other things we asked about public spaces in downtown. Again, speaking of that kind of community events and activities, music and events venue was the highest response rate for a place to gather as a community. adaptable plaza space. The adaptable component, I think, was resonating with folks. A space that can serve more than one function. And of course, shade. We all know how warm it gets in the summer when we're outside. So that was a prevalent theme, which here the picture shows a tree, but it could also be awnings, canopies, other structures that provide shade for different types of activities. Moving right along, we asked a series of questions specifically geared towards the downtown and specifically dealing with land use mix. The question that we asked, we'd shared a map of our downtown showing the Cleveland Avenue corridor with a red border around it, and then the McKinley Avenue corridor and the Harrison Avenue corridor with a different color border around it. And we specifically asked, of those two categories, the main street and the two streets parallel, for each of these different land use types, where would you see those within the downtown mix? And you can see here in this chart, the theme that emerged from those responses was that a majority of respondents wanted to see retail, dining, food and beverage along the Cleveland corridor, and maybe some of the civic buildings, churches, residential would be located more along the Harrison or McKinley corridors. And then you see a couple of categories, mixed use, could maybe be both or blend between the two, as well as hospitality lodging. That was kind of a mixed result. So it could be that people were acceptable to either scenario with maybe some caveats. Some of the additional responses that we received with this question included that light industrial was not desired near the downtown, that should be separate. The lodging question again indicated that maybe that wasn't appropriate from downtown. One of the comments specifically related to this one mentioned safety as a concern, which could be related to the parking and traffic and pedestrian activities downtown, which we'll come back to on a later slide here in a minute. And lastly, one of the comments was that there weren't enough options being provided. We specifically didn't offer other options with this because we were really trying to drill down on what are the land use mixes for the downtown. If we left too many other categories out there, we wouldn't be able to get the type of response that we did, which we need to make land use decisions for an area like this. So again, we asked a second question, and we were specifically looking at the residential uses, same two areas, Cleveland and then two side streets, two parallel streets. So we asked that question, and we posed it in terms of where would single family be located, townhomes, 3 to 4 story mid-rise residential, and then mixed use, and then getting the hospitality or lodging. And you can see in this chart, when you ask the residential component specifically, the Harrison and McKinley corridors were identified as the prevalent location for any of the residential uses. The exception again being mixed uses, so like residential lofts on second or third floors could probably be in both categories. And then the lodging piece again, maybe it's a mix of both, or could be allowed in both. The themes that we heard in the additional comments was a desire to limit the residential to 2 stories, which would be fairly consistent with our current downtown and might be a good option for the future. A focus on retail, not housing. Again, that particular comment was in response to the last question about where do you want to see residential, Cleveland or Harrison McKinley. So it was specific to that question. Again, the lodging with the safety concerns. And then again, finally, there was a lot of comments that said we just want other options, and I'd already explained that one. So then we talked about the actual physical elements in the downtown. What would the residents of the community like to see in our downtown? And we got a great response rate for additional outdoor seating, cafe options on our main street. Additional seating and landscape options was ranked pretty highly, and then planters, that green space, that need for some variety to break up the concrete and the pavement and the storefronts. The next question we'd asked about what street features were appropriate for downtown and Main Street. A lot of respondents were seeking additional parking solutions. And then the next two highest scoring were really geared towards pedestrian improvements for pedestrian functionality and pedestrian safety. This next question is a little bit tricky. When we put it out, we had described these different scenarios in text. And what you see is what was put out for the question options. And really what we highlighted from that response rate, you see in the dashed border here, 80% of respondents on this question said that they wanted additional on-street parking, either angled parking on both sides of the street or angled parking on at least one side of the street that would keep the center turn lane. And since that time, when we put the survey out, we developed this image that kind of better describes what that looks like. And you can see here, there's my cursor. The big difference here is the center turn lane that exists today in option A. Option B, the center turn lane goes away. And what that does is it creates room for angled parking on both sides of the street with the same two through lanes we have today. Option B has a wider sidewalk for more space for cafe seating and street amenities. Option A keeps the center turn lane to facilitate turn movements. And instead of angled parking on both sides, it'd be one side parallel, which is what we have today, and the other side angle. And that could rotate or alternate block to block, depending on adjacent businesses and needs. So that's a graphic that kind of represents what we were seeing a desire for some changes to the street mix. We asked the question, what retail options are most needed in town? This is overall not specific to downtown, but just in town general, and not surprising. This is a common result in most plan efforts. Places of dining was the highest scoring category. And in this case, followed by general merchandise and food and beverage stores. It's a pretty typical result, and our community was no different, but it's still helpful nonetheless. We asked a couple of follow-up questions to that. We asked where the community thinks those retail and commercial growth areas would be. You can see in the charts here, 85% of the response. That's not of the percentages don't equal 100. It's of those taking and answering that question. But the Ridley's market area was identified as the highest, probably because it's the most prevalent. If there's already a few businesses there, people understand it. It's already started, and they just wanted to see that continue and see more of that. The other categories were around the new high school and Highway 1, and then the industrial park. Of those responding, we asked what types of businesses should go in those areas, and we saw a strong desire for mixed use and retail being the largest sectors, and then of course industrial. People expect industrial, so that was not surprising on that front. The follow-up to that question, or those two questions there, was what types of buildings. We're trying to get to the character of those areas for the architecture and building design theme. And what we saw for retail was that a lot of respondents, again, are getting back to that agricultural heritage of the community and wanting to see that reflected in the building character and design. The other image we shared was this kind of an activated alley, and that got a strong response rate as well. For the mixed use buildings, we saw the highest response rates on kind of this 2 to 3 story mix with some combination of storefronts, taller building storefronts, maybe some mixed use with residential lofts up above for that question 14. And then question 15 for industrial buildings, what we're seeing here is when you say industrial, most people traditionally kind of think of just a standard metal building, and the largest response, what we're actually seeing is people want to see windows and storefronts and architectural variations, some unique character to highlight those industrial areas. And in these examples, the examples we shared are a little bit smaller spaces. that are more flex space, business space, as opposed to just giant, warehouse industrial type buildings. So that gives us a good indicator for what the community would prefer to see from a building standpoint. The next part I'm going to highlight is the downtown specific area. This map is a little small on your screens, and I apologize for that scale. But I want to briefly highlight kind of the themes that we identified through our public engagement. We saw a strong desire for the downtown to have multiple modes of transportation options. Just to highlight some of these areas, and actually I should take a step back and identify the area in general. You see the dashed line here highlighting what most of our respondents and concurred by staff and our consultant team was that the downtown area is not just the main Cleveland Avenue strip with businesses on each side of it. Our community is really seeing the downtown as being a larger area functionally than just the core business strip we have today. That would allow some future expansion. And then as you'll start to see, as I'll explain here, there's opportunities for expanding those uses into these red areas. These are areas that by the county tax records are vacant or underutilized. Of course, you have Centennial Park, which is a big element there. But you have a lot of vacant spaces on Cleveland Avenue. Some of the spaces that have improvements on them, but might be storage, open lot storage, vacant space that could be repurposed. You can see these dashed lines represent the alleys. A lot of comments were, how do we activate our alleys for transportation, for spaces for pedestrians, outdoor seating and dining? What are the options and what are some examples for how to better utilize our alleys? You can see this other dashed line going north to south along 3rd Street was identified as one of the primary both connecting and through routes through the downtown. It certainly has the highest traffic of our other north-south streets, and there's probably a need for some intersection improvements to facilitate those different patterns in the downtown here. We also identified that there's a need to connect to the downtown from our adjacent subdivisions. And one of the ways that was identified that we could start to look at doing that was providing these green belts or pedestrian corridors on 4th, 5th, and maybe 6th Street. 6th Street was identified as needing the sidewalks going north. I personally agree with that. But we also talked about there could be some combination projects that included pedestrian and bike amenities into the downtown on 4th or 5th Street that might also be coupled with some stormwater improvement projects that would alleviate some of the flooding downtown and provide green amenities in the downtown area as well. Last, I'll move on. I'll highlight that these archways here, graphically represented, we're not proposing candy canes, but these were identified as kind of the primary entryways into the downtown area. 6th Street was not identified as the primary entryway. Obviously, it's the functional transportation entry, but the 6th Street and Cleveland intersection is really geared more towards automotive businesses, a different character along 6th Street, and 5th Street might provide a good gateway opportunity to help pull traffic from visitors visiting our community to see what's in our downtown and not just stop at the first turn in our community to actually draw them into our businesses downtown. Now on the west side, just past the railroads was identified as the other entrance to the historic downtown. West of that location, these areas are starting to develop at the Meridian subdivision to a little bit more modern look and feel. And south of Cleveland, we've got some larger lot residential subdivisions that would be a little bit harder to transition into a downtown mix. And so it wasn't identified as being desirable to change that land use to something that would be more like a historic downtown. So I've only got a couple slides left and then I'll stop. I promise I'll give you a chance to ask some questions and provide some comments. The last I wanted to highlight, transportation. we are, as part of our comprehensive plan update, we are working with a sub-consultant, Felsberg Holton Olivig. They're doing the transportation master plan for our community with staff's guidance. They're looking at multiple modes of transportation, so vehicles, truck traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, the gamut, and they're making recommendations with some staff guidance as well. So we're going to have that as part of the draft plan that we roll out. But we specifically wanted to highlight this kind of transition area from along Highway 1 from our downtown into South Highway 1, which Highway 1 County Road 9 is our major north-south arterial roadway through town. It's one of the only corridors that provides through connectivity north to south. So it's a really important area for our community, as well as Cleveland, which is the heart of our downtown and also our interstate access. So this curve of the highway presents some development challenges as well as some safety conflicts at these intersections where we've got a new high school going in, and we've got high school drivers that are looking back over their shoulder for oncoming traffic at 55 miles per hour. That's not exactly a desirable scenario for those drivers or for the community. And so we've reached out to CDOT and Larimer County for some input on what this might look like. And actually town staff, as well as the representatives from Larimer County and CDOT, all agreed that the best scenario for this from a safety standpoint, from a land development standpoint, from a community long-range vision standpoint, this curve really wants to go away and make this an intersection here, eliminates these unsafe angled intersections onto a highway and lets all the traffic circulate on one intersection where we can control the safety movements there and reduce speeds and free up a lot of the land inside this curve here for future development, provide better access to the adjacent properties for future development. And that intersection can really bookend both ends of our Cleveland corridor for the town. So we're continuing to work on this intersection. I specifically highlight this here as our board may now be aware. We're going to provide some additional information about this at our work session next week. But the town has applied for and obtained grant funding to facilitate this intersection to the tune of just over $700,000 to help defray costs here. So we're very excited to make that announcement and pursue making this intersection something that's a little more functional for our community. So last slide, as I promised, just the next steps that are coming up. We are going to meet once more with our steering committee before the holidays here. We've given them some homework, reviewing some of the draft goals and strategies. We're working on final touches at a staff level on the future land use map, and we're going to give that to the steering committee to comment on. Once we get those pieces kind of lined up and we have our discussion next week on the 16th, staff will be working with Logan Simpson, our consultant, to put together the final touches of the draft plan. And we'll be releasing that draft plan to the public in late December, early January. We're going to allow some time for the public to digest that information and submit comments, responses, and have further dialogue on that. And we hope to get the final touches put on the public comments and wrap this up in and around March with bringing plan adoption to the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission. If we get that piece completed, right on its heels will be the land use code updates with provisions for zoning, subdivision regulations, the look and feel of the town. And we'd hope to do that in the second and third quarter of next year. So that's where we've been, where we're at, and where we're headed. I'd be happy to stand for any questions or comments from the board.
Well, anybody got comments?
So I did just want to share a couple of things. First off, I did want to just say I appreciate all the work that you've put into this, Cody, and getting to be part of this from the the steering committee for the seeing all the work that you and staff put in. I really appreciate that. There were a couple of comments. One, I did want to bring up that, and this was more of a concern with this later issue, and Cody and I have discussed this, and he brought up the concerns with some of the questions And the issue with that, I think, was that I know for a fact it's probably about 6 or 7 people, which does not sound significant, but in the case of the responses, that was about 10% of the responses. And I was one of them on several of the questions where my answer was, I don't want to see either one of these options. And so you ended up having people choosing option A or option B when it was like, I don't feel either of these are appropriate. So that was something that did come up in this last set of surveys where Cody did point out there were some people that weren't happy with the options. Is it was just simply we had people that they had to vote for something so they could complete it, but they really were saying, you know, in my case it was the I believe it was the multi-story, whether it should be on Harrison and McKinley or whether it should be on the Main Street itself, and I don't feel it should be either. And so unfortunately I had to choose one option. So when it ends up, you have votes going into this that actually don't count. So that was just something that hopefully we can work that out through future surveys that we do. But that was one comment I did want to make. The other question, and I guess we are going to talk further about this, but I did have a concern with the roundabout on State Highway 1 is what impact is that going to have on River of Life, whose property is right in the space where I would assume that roundabout would have to go.
Is that a question or a comment?
I don't know.
We're gonna have a work session on that.
Know the answer to that yet or not, or if that's better.
Well, I got the same question, John. We're gonna have a work session on that.
Okay.
I got the same question with that River of Life property. Where's the detention pond, all that stuff, all that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, and as the mayor alluded to, staff is working on a presentation that we'll share with more nuts and bolts on that for next week's work session. Just at a high level, though, I have talked with the leadership team from River of Life Church, and they actually expressed, I presented the 3 options that were evaluated, and they actually came back and told me that the roundabout was their preferred alternative.
Okay, great.
So
I'm glad to hear that. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. We've started that dialogue, but there's certainly still more to go.
Anyone else? We're going to have a lot more rollouts on this. There's going to be public comment. There's more steering committee, so it's not over. It's a great attempt at getting this thing up and running in a long ways coming. So I like it.
With the code review portion, Cody, because I know that we've just dealt with the comprehensive plan. Is there a separate steering committee that's dealing with code, or that's the only thing I do have a slight concern about is that I haven't really heard anything about how the code portion of this is going.
Yeah, good question. So staff had envisioned that the steering committee would be the same for both those efforts. They're really the same effort. When you think of the big picture, the comp plan sets the vision. The land use code is the first tool towards implementation of that vision. So we wanted that overlap in the steering committee. Certainly if some changes need to take place, we'll evaluate that, but our vision was that it would be the same. You haven't seen much of the land use code updates because it's a bunch of text, right? And the first step in evaluating what that text needs to say is understanding the vision for what the community wants to see. And then we'll start to adapt those paragraphs and paragraphs of text to reflect what the community vision is in the comp plan. So,
okay, perfect. So that's
it's a
that'll
process.
be upcoming as we flesh out the other portion.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the way it was always envisioned. When we put together the RFP, the scope said, we want to do these parallel, not quite concurrently because the comp plan has to come first. But that's how we've envisioned this process from the start.
Other comments? Thank you, Cody. I know we'll be talking again about it. Appreciate the presentation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move on to some reports. Town attorney, anything? Huh?
Mr. Marks, you're muted.
I'm there. I got it. Sorry about that. I told the board I'd give you reports relative to the initiative matter. It's set on the agenda for next meeting. I had an opportunity to have a discussion with the proponent's attorney today. He indicates that his clients are out of the country. They have briefs that are due on the 11th. There doesn't seem to be any great urgency to this from the town's perspective. As the board is aware, we have the tax ordinance on the agenda or before the voters in November. Beyond that, if the proponents have asked for an extension, I've been inclined to give them one. He indicated the attorney indicated he would draft a request to the court asking for additional time. I don't have an objection to that. It seems to be cost savings. And what I've heard from the board is if we can come up with a solution to get this to the voters, that's what the board would like to do. The concern has been that the board does not want the enforcement powers emaciated relative to this. And that thus far, at least from the attorney, they've been very amenable to making changes to the proposed ordinance and getting it on the ballot. He has had some problems apparently contacting his client. So he said he would hope to get a hold of them. We were looking at extending it probably into January. I'll still give the board a report because it was postponed until then at the next meeting.
Okay. Town attorney, town administrator. Got anything you want to say, Patty?
I'm learning a lot. There is so much. It's like every time I open a new document, it's like, oh, I need to remember this. I'm like, oh my goodness, more to remember. But it has been a great first week. I've got to say I've enjoyed meeting with all of you. I think I just need to meet with Trustee Jerome, which we will find a time to get together one-on-one and meet face-to-face and then schedule your meetings. But I appreciate all of you giving me your time and talking through some things with me and giving me telling me your hearts and your visions for Wellington. I love this community already. I can't even begin to tell you. I brought my son and grandson down on Saturday night for the tree lighting walk drive through and all that stuff. And he got to see Santa on the street and stuff, which was just the epitome of small town fun. It was really great, even just having to drive through. I wanted to really thank Judi and Tyler for all their work on the budget. I mean, Judy's been here for 3 months and she pulled this off. So, I mean, I cannot usually it's a 6-month process on budget and she pulled it off in 3. So I really appreciate all her work that she did. So I wanted to make sure I voiced that to everyone. But that's all I have for an update for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from staff, if any of them are still around? No? Okay. Okay, board members, anything else? John?
Go ahead, Trustee Kenny, go ahead.
Just a reminder for everyone, today is Colorado Gives Day. So if anybody, it slipped their mind and they had intentions of donating to their favorite nonprofit, today is the day to do that for Colorado Gives Day. So go out and give if you are able to, please, and support our community. The big message I want to say is make sure if you have the opportunity to and want to, give to some place that will benefit our local community. Thank you.
Nice.
So then I just wanted to share a couple of things that have come up just in conversations as I've been speaking with citizens over the last couple of months. And so the first thing, which is good news, is that people have been taking the time. I've been very appreciative to see more citizens taking time to come to the meetings and share comments and concerns, which is what I've been encouraging them to do. I've seen several citizens reach out with emails to the board with concerns they have, which is great. One thing I do want to share, and I feel it is relevant, and it's, so be clear, this is based on past perception. This is not, we as a board have done this, but the perception that I get from a lot of people the first time I talk to them is that our elected officials don't care what we say, so it's not worth me coming to the meetings and saying something. And I've been trying to tell people it does matter. This board does listen. And so I just think that's something that's important for us to keep in mind when we do get those emails from citizens, when we do have citizens comment. It has been fantastic to see the way comments were handled today. The last few meetings have been fantastic where we've actually said, hey, we're going to do something, we're going to deal with this. Citizens really appreciate that. And I think the more that we can make sure that we're doing that as an elected officials, we can change that perception that the public has from the past, that our town staff, that our elected officials in Wellington don't care what the citizens have to say. I don't think it's true. I think we actually care quite a bit. But I just wanted to make you guys aware that that's a little bit of the challenge we're fighting, is the past perception people have. And we've been doing a good job recently, I think, to address that. I just want to see that I will continue to work towards that, but I hope that we can all, as a board and as town staff, I've talked to Patty about this, but to work to really help people see that we really do care and value their input, and we are all here to serve the citizens of our town and make sure they know that. So just want to share that with you guys.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rebecca. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I mean, this has been a bit of a slog the last couple months. I mean, with the budget and everything else. And, you know, town staff, I think, has done a great job. And, you know, we may not all agree here, but I think we're very engaged. And I think that's where we need to be. And again, residents may not always feel the same way about certain subjects as we do, but I'm really encouraged by the hard work I've seen with the trustees and certainly as usual with the staff. So it's been a crazy year and I'm really glad it's almost over. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else real quick?
I just had one thing. As you all know, about a month ago, or not quite, J.C. Cox had sent his letter of resignation from the PAB. I've had a few conversations with him. And the last conversation I had with him was he was going to think about it and he would get back to me. And that was about 2.5 weeks ago. I haven't heard from JC. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that we should probably just go ahead and accept his resignation and open up another slot on the PAB and try to get that filled.
Yeah, well, we had one guy tonight that wanted to be on it.
There you go.
So that's good. Well, I appreciate you following up on that, John.
Yep.
You know, that's important. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. We got through quite a bit tonight. And like all the other trustees said, you know, you may not think we haven't been doing much. We've been doing a lot this last year. Wow. And we're almost through it. Let's wait and see what happens next year. So I got 9:40. I like the motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a nice evening.